Now we can see
Yeah.
you.
And I can hear you.
There we go.
Thanks, BG.
On to the meeting. Next thing on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, March 8th. I remember the meeting, okay.
I make a motion, we approve the minutes of March 8th, 2023.
I'll second it. So the motion by Chris, second by Kent to approve the minutes of March 8th. All those in favor? March. In favor. Next, there are department reports. I usually go this way, but
Yes, good evening. I'll be brief, based on the amount of items on the agenda tonight. As some of you may know, you're aware the MDOT work plan for 23 through 25 was published roughly about a week and a half ago. In looking at what they have planned for Monmouth, the replacement of the Wagon Bridge is still on there. The replacement of what they're calling the Bailey Flats Bridge, which is just beginning of the Cobussy Road, is on there for replacement. And it does show what appears to be our pending sidewalk project with them on the plan as well. So it's interesting information to pass on that's what they're showing for Monmouth projects over the next couple of years. Today, the entire Public Works crew attended a training that was held at the Sabattis Town Office. It was work zone construction, set up for signs, traffic control, flagging operations. A very good training. Some of the gentlemen had already attended. This was a refresher. A few of us had never attended it, so it was our first time through. Well put on training by Maine Local Roads Commission. Pete Coughlin was the presenter of the course, and got all the crew on the same page is what we need to do for our work zones out on the roads for our safety as well as motorist safety. And an interesting ending to it was at the end of the training, we found out that Tom Gregor, who's been with Public Works now for 23 years, this training today completed his Road Scholar program through Maine DOT, and he's now going to be recognized as a Maine Road Scholar. So we had an informal applause for him today, and he will get his official plaque and recognition at the Highway Congress in Skowhegan on June 1st. So it's a good accomplishment for him. The plugged culvert on Maycumber Road is unplugged at the moment. We are winning the war with the beavers as of now. They did create, by plugging it and it freezing, it did damage it. But as far as we can tell right now, it's not damaged under the road surface. It's just damaged from the shoulder out to its existing ending. We hope to be able to repair it without tearing up the road any further. And the fortunate incident out of that was while we were out there working on it, a gentleman stopped. His name is Chip Woodman. He lives on the Crescent Road.
we know Chip.
We know Chip, another 1985 graduate.
Class
85.
He is a licensed beaver trapper.
Hey, that was my next question.
He's a nuisance trapper, so.
Yes, he is licensed nuisance trapper. So he asked me where my other trouble spots were at the moment, and he is actively pursuing them. He is just going to take the catch for his own use for the hides, whatever he does. He's not asking for any type of compensation. I've given him a verbal to go ahead and start trapping where he feels appropriate. If we need to do anything more final or official, please let me know. He made sure he wanted me to volunteer his services to Winthrop, Leeds and Green as well. So I was going to put his name out there to them because I think we're all looking for somebody who's responsible and active and taking care care of the beaver situation, so FYI on that.
So Chip knows his way around the regulations.
Yeah, I think he might know a few things about what's legal and what's not.
What's okay and what's not okay and how close to skate to the edge.
Certainly. And as a side note, he ended the conversation by saying that Cressy Road is in better shape than it's been in many years. Appreciative of that.
Yeah.
So I figured I'd pass that on because you were a big factor in putting some money into that road. So that was a nice compliment to get as well. The last thing I'll bring up tonight, we had a couple electrical outlets fail at the building, which prompted a call to the electrician. He fixed those, and while he was at our building, he noticed that all our fixtures were incandescent or the older type fixtures, and said, we can work with Efficiency Maine to do an LED conversion. I asked him to go ahead and research it for me and let me know. So he's going to get back to me with what the figures might look like to do an LED conversion for every light in that building. And obviously what costs may be involved. So once I have that information, I will present it to Justin and we can go from there at that. At the moment, that's what I'll highlight at the moment.
I have a question. So after the sidewalks are completed and they're turned over to us, what happens if, after 4 or 5 months, the pavement is already breaking down on the edge where it goes onto the lawn? How is that handled? Whether it's winter and that's the reason it happened, talking about Maple Street. Because there's a couple places right in front of Alan's house. I mean, it's really broken down. So whether that's the nature of the beast or
There's a contributing factor there, and that is the
Side-
side drain.
well, I know that there, yes,
It's draining right to the edge of the sidewalk,
yeah,
and it is flooding there, causing the soil underneath,
to
Saturated.
yeah, exactly.
which is causing the sidewalk
Side-
to collapse.
And also the sidewalk plow ran right on the edge of, as
Yes,
you can see the tire track right
Oh,
on the edge of the pavement.
Yeah.
And also where it took out the corners of the granite steps that were put in down in front of. Well, I'm not sure if they hit yours. And then, but then further down at the next house, both of those granite steps were. The corners were taken out too, so I'm not sure if it's a matter of moving the sidewalk plow over or what. So just wondering how that gets handled.
as far as the resolution, I don't have an answer to that tonight. As far as moving the sidewalk plow over, it's tight, very tight space. The closer we move to the curb edge, the more chance we run of sliding off the curb. And with a 6-inch, 7-inch curb, you run the risk of that machine sliding off and tipping over.
Right.
So
That's not good.
we have to hug towards the properties to be safe. So as far as a resolution for issues, we'll have to discuss it.
Yeah.
But I, at the moment, I don't want them to move out closer to the road because it's much more dangerous. So we will have to come up with brainstorming session and talk about it, see what we can do.
While we're on the topic, have we made any progress with encouraging people to figure out their surface water disposal sump pump things going on down there?
At this point, I have not had any conversations with anyone.
I know that there were some residents down there that were working on it. And yeah, she was working with an engineer to sort of find a dry well place where she could put stuff, but I don't know if that's the entirety of it or if there's more.
I'm at this point, I'm just seeing the surface issues that everybody's seeing. I haven't dug into it any further at this point.
And then the corner at the side, at the post office, that concrete's chunked out, pretty good sized chunk.
Okay.
on the corner. So, and I think it's gonna get made worse by the infamous U-turns in front of the post office, because I watch people run up over that brand new curb to go to the post office, so.
Right, and I'm not deflecting blame or placing blame, but the contractor that plows the post office clears the sidewalk by plowing on it.
Oh, yeah, I saw that, but
Yeah,
this is
so-
on the corner, so I don't think he touched that one because it's on the actual corner of Maple Street. It's on the Maple Street corner,
Oh, okay,
so,
well. We can address, you know.
yeah.
Get a list together and have a discussion about what we do. If you look at the corner out here.
Oh, yeah, I know.
We're still in Academy.
Yes.
We caught that with
Yeah.
the wing and ripped out two big sections.
Yeah,
The Curbs look nice. And they're great for warmer climates.
yeah.
In
Concrete is not
It's
plow friendly.
not plow friendly at all. And do our best, but mistakes happen, accidents happen, slip ups happen, so we just have to deal with them and address them when the time comes.
Those are all my questions I have.
You're welcome.
Good evening. Don't have a lot, just want to remind everybody that we do have a drug drop-off box at the lobby at the PD, so if anybody has any prescription drugs, that they need to dispose of, please bring them in and we'll take care of them for them. We did have a 2-hour block of training with the Memorial School and the Academy on Friday morning. In regards to the active shooter policy that we're putting in place. Training went well, very well. It was our 4th time in with the teachers. In the administration. And it's going very well, so I just wanted to update you on that. Other than that, that's it.
Or not, okay.
Yes, both schools. Yeah.
Teacher day.
That's it.
Any question?
I think he's driving though. I think he's just listening.
Yeah, no, it looks like he's.
Okay. I know he's somewhere between, what, Connecticut and Presque Isle or the other way around.
How you doing tonight?
That's a fun ride.
Yeah.
I did,
Can you hear me okay?
yes.
Yeah, I'm pulled over. I'm at the Kennebunkport rest stop, so I'm safe. Yeah, good evening. I apologize for being so absent. Just a busy time of the year from my work. And yeah, I'm in between Presque Isle and Hartford, Connecticut, but happy to be with you fine folks. Anyway, just a couple things for the fire department. We continue to be pretty busy. In fact, we're on pace for another record year as far as call outs. Don't know what's in the water, but we're pretty busy. Nothing really too important to report as far as incidents. Training this Thursday. We're working on RIT training. That's rescuing our own firefighters for fire scenes. So we'll be doing some RIT training and SCBA review of the equipment. And we're this Sunday, we're going to be doing the community dinner.
All the sound is over.
What's that? Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Go ahead.
You're good.
I'm sorry. Yeah, somebody else was overriding me. So this Sunday we'll be doing the community dinner with the auxiliary. We'll be having a ham dinner, so hope to see some folks out there for that. I know every year we always compete with the PD on numbers. I don't know if they've done their dinner yet, so we'll have to keep notes on how many dinners we serve. Yeah. So that's really all I have for the fire department. We're going into the spring, so we're going to be getting ready for forest fire season next month, and hopefully it's a quiet season. But other than that, that's all I got. Unless there's any questions.
Questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I was just wondering, when you're talking about forest fires, do you have any idea or have you been notified the condition of the woodlands in the area as far as, because we had so little snow in the beginning part of the season, is there enough moisture out there? Or are we looking at another dry season?
That's a great question. I do think we're gonna have a relatively dry season. That's a great point to make. I have not spoken with the local forest rangers or the Forest Service to see what their take is on it. I know we just had a meeting this past Monday night with the local forest rangers, and I was unable to attend that meeting. I'll see if I can get some notes from that meeting. Perhaps that was discussed, but I would anticipate it's probably going to be a relatively dry season, just because of the lack of moisture. But we won't know for a little while. We're still a couple weeks away.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Yep. Have a good night. I'm gonna drive, but I'll be listening to you guys. Thank you.
Okay. Dave, do you want to?
Andy is on.
Oh, yes.
If
Oh, yeah.
If he puts his camera on, maybe he can say hello. Andy, you around? Maybe not. I've been working with him. I have a couple more meetings with him, trying to bring him up to speed. I think we're doing well. So time will tell.
He'll be able to do the monthly reports.
He'll be able to do monthly reports.
Sorry, guys.
There he is. Is that him? Andy? Yeah, there he is.
Yeah.
Hello.
You want to say anything to Andy?
What's that? No, David given you guys the synopsis last time around, so I think, just doing that, there hasn't really been anything crazy yet, still trying to get everything going and transition when Dave leaves here soon, so. I'm just on tonight for later actions, I guess, just to kind of hear what's going on.
Okay. Thank you.
Person, we had the phones installed this week. We're working through those different things, yeah, so that the phone numbers, the old phone numbers are still alive, but they won't be for long, so. Update your content, it's all updated online and on Google and on Google Maps and all that, but
So the 2206 has gone.
they're not portable, so we couldn't keep them. They're consolidated, they're part of their can't transform to anybody else, so we lost those phone numbers. So they're new, so if you need to update your information, look on the website, it's been.
So the 933 is going away?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
As soon as you get the new numbers, if you can put them up on the website so that people.
Yeah, that's what I just was mentioning. They're all on Google and on Map.
Okay,
I've updated them everywhere I can think of, so.
I need help with getting my email to be more automatic with my phone at
Okay.
some point.
Yep.
And then, the front door to this building, we're continuing to have a latch problem. I noticed
Yep.
this is the end of the economic development.
Right,
Committee
yep,
meeting last night.
I'm kind of waiting for Mark to come back from
Okay.
sunny FLA.
They can't get rid of it. You don't know if he's embarrassed or sunburned.
What do they, what's,
The door locks, but it doesn't latch.
It
so
doesn't latch.
It's
You
a
have to-
security issue.
Yeah,
You have to kind of beat on it. pretty good
Yeah,
to get it to latch, yeah.
exactly. I had the same issue after the academy meeting,
Yes.
so, yeah.
The contractor will be home late next week. So make sure that there's no dirt on the inside between the edge of the door and the door jamb.
Yeah.
That's what was happening before. There was some little pebbles and dirt in there, which was causing the bottom of the door to bulge out and lift
Yeah.
up where the latch is. If anything, push down on the knob and it should help it latch, but we'll make some adjustments to it when I get back.
okay. Thank you. Next, there are some select board reports.
I'm wearing a mask tonight because we have a little COVID thing going on at the Ackley household. So this is, I'm okay, but others are not. So this is just in case. We had a meeting of the economic, it's mild, by the way. It's totally fine. It's like a cold. We have a meeting of the Economic Development Committee last night. And we considered some of the issues that we've been working on since like last June regarding changes to the existing TIF, the Tax Increment Financing District. And those changes, folks, just to fill you in on some background, you might recall you filled out a survey at the June meeting of last spring. And that survey sort of asked folks how they wanted the TIF spending priorities to be reconfigured. And so we have now not only spending priorities that are consistent with what those surveys, both the voters and Facebook people all combined, told us to do, but also we've run it up the flagpole with the Department of Economic and Community Development at the state to make sure that it's compliant with what they're expecting. We've put it into language that is ready for the ballot. And I think we're ready to refer the matter to the select board. Justin, is that something we can talk about tonight, or can we talk about it on April 4th?
The amendments,
Yes.
probably should be an agenda item. So I would, yeah, and you can touch on it tonight, but you can't take any action. So
All right.
you want to wait until.
Is it possible that we could add it to the June ballot at our next meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so can we make sure that that gets considered then? Nothing earth shattering. It basically prioritizes community trail building. It prioritizes using economic development funding for protecting lakes. It prioritizes opening the door to allowing the fire department to be partially funded with economic development funding because they're protecting the substation that is the basis for that TIF district, which is helpful to taxpayers because this is kind of double dipped money that is more valuable to the town. A couple of other minor things. It retires some old categories that had never been used and people aren't really putting them that high on the priority list to be used. So the idea of an industrial park is kind of coming off of the TIF plan. Trying to think what else. Have I missed anything, Justin?
I don't think so. You remove I think you've covered it.
Okay, so that's the basic idea. The Economic Development Committee made an official vote. We're recommending that the select board put this on the ballot for June for voters to consider, and that's the general gist of things. One other thing, I see Pat from Norris Hill is online with us tonight, and I've been working with Pat and Senator Hickman to come to some sort of resolution on what can be done with regard to the orchard cannons that are used to deter birds on Norris Hill. And so that's a work in progress. There's a bill asking the department to put together what they consider to be best practices so we can all have a common understanding of exactly what that is and publish it so that it's a public document. And so that everyone knows whether or not best practices are being followed or not ahead of time and not after the fact. We're going back and forth with the Agriculture Department with the assistance of Senator Hickman to sort of nail down the specifics of exactly what those best practices should be and should they be required by law to publish them, or are they just gonna do it? So we'll figure it out. Working on it, work in progress.
Anything else? No. I just wanted to just make a request that we get an AED for this building.
I have something when you guys are ready.
Okay, yes.
After listening to the salesperson from Revision Energy and talking about the solar panels, I wanted us to get another perspective, and I would like to introduce subject matter expert Jim Lebret to give us his views on solar panels and their effects on the grid. And I know Jim is on the meeting here with us. Jim, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, go ahead. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, I was asked to make some comments on solar. I've done this for a number of towns. I got some bad news, and that is that there's a growing controversy that's rapidly growing about solar panels. The good news is, I'm telling these towns, is that there's no need to rush. Well, if you do it this year, next year, or the year after, I think the longer you wait, the better off you are, the better a decision, a better informed decision you can make for your towns. There's legislation moving right now. Big one right now is on it's going to deal with the cost and responsibility of decommissioning these solar panels and recycling them. That's going to be a very expensive proposition that a lot of towns and a lot of companies are going to get stuck with, because the cost might be extremely high, and especially with all of the material inside of these solar panels. Secondly, there is an issue with the mass of the stuff. You know, it doesn't look like there'd be much of a concern if you just have a few solar panels and somebody wanted to dispose them someplace. But if you wanted to do like the NECEC line, 1,200 megawatts for 1 week, that would be enough panels to wrap around planet Earth one time and all the way into Pennsylvania again. Then when it's time to dispose of those, you have to unload a tractor trailer truck worth of solar panels every hour of the day, 24 hours a day for 4 years. You know, where are you going to put that stuff, and who's going to be responsible? So that's this whole disposal thing is a big issue. One of my biggest concerns is that this net energy billing that allows on is unfortunately the biggest Ponzi scheme ever in the state of Maine. And this is why. You see, the people on solar come off from the grid, and they don't only not pay their share to be connected to the grid, but they also get 85% of what you have to give the T&D company. Well, that's fine for a few people that get on it at first, but once more and more people go from paying into the grid instead of, and then end up receiving money from the grid and free services, then the few that are left behind can't afford to pay for this anymore. So it becomes a death spiral. And as you know, what a Ponzi scheme is that they entice people for 15% to get in, or a little cheaper to get into the program, but they don't realize that they're making out-of-state investment firms extremely rich, because Maine ratepayers that are paying have to give several 100% above market cost for electricity, and on top of to the state investment firms And then the contractors are mostly from out of state. And then all the manufacturing of all the inverters and equipment and solar panels and everything is from out of the country, primarily from China. So but this
Jim, we're losing you. You're in a bad spot, I think. We'll give him a minute and see if he gets to a better spot. Anybody else have anything?
I do. My name's Luke, and I'm actually from the town of Green. And I wanted to hear about, I heard that you guys were having a discussion about the solar panels and today, and I wanted to hear what you guys, what you were thinking of doing. Because I too understand. Is he back?
Yeah, Jim's back.
Go ahead, let him finish before he goes out again.
Oh, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm traveling and I'm between just outside of Gray, coming back from Buxton heading to Bangor. I had planned on stopping in there, but I got postponed and on the startup. So I don't know where I left you off, but I'll start back off with the scheme. The way the legislation works is that investors from out of state are the ones that are receiving very, very high subsidies from the electric ratepayers in the state. And it's an unjust enrichment to that point. But then they also get all the federal money out of from the taxes, so they're double dipping. But here's the big problem, is that every time somebody gets off from paying their fair share of using the T&D, transmission distribution system, there's less people to pay in, so their cost goes up. And then at some point, when too many people start doing like the town of Monmouth and other towns and other people want to do, there's not enough people paying in and too many people receiving. And this is what I call a death spiral, and this whole thing's going to collapse. So even both sides of the aisle in legislation are very concerned about like this whole net energy billing. But I said also that I was very concerned about the fact that this system of these wealthy people over the line taking this money, the contractors are over state line. We don't have enough people here. If you look at these solar fields, they're all, the cars parked out there from all out of state. So this is a transfer of wealth from Maine, where we're paying exorbitant prices to these out of state investment firms. And then they're paying out of state contractors, and they're paying foreigners to build all the capital equipment, the solar panels and the inverters and everything. So at some point, it's going to become too burdensome for those that left paying, and the whole system collapsed. I'm very concerned about that. And I'm very concerned that very wealthy people are going to collect money for the next 25 years off from us. And it's going to be our children, our grandchildren are going to have to start paying for this stuff. And then also, I'm very concerned about the disposal of this mass amount of equipment in the future with all the toxic waste. So there's a lot of reasons to sit back and say, maybe we ought to be smart and just watch a little bit longer and learn a little bit more and see how things are shaping up. Nobody's holding a gun to our head, so let's cool and learn some more. There's no reason why we have to rush today. So that's basically it, but I can answer any questions you might want.
Jim, I have a few questions that you might answer for me. I
Who
just
am I
read,
speaking to?
Jim, my name's Kent Ackley. I'm a select board member tonight and former legislator, and have seen the debate on whether solar is draining the system of users or whether it's actually helping the system in some way. And I wonder if you could answer a few questions for me. Have you seen the recent article? I think it was in Business Insider 2 weeks ago, describing the new companies being formed that are in the solar panel recycling business.
Yeah, yes, and I have not been able to get, my biggest concern with that, I have one in New Hampshire and one in Massachusetts. There's a couple concerns. One is, nobody knows what the cost is going to be in 25 years from now. And if you don't have a way of having a company, an insurance company or a bonding company that can take the responsibility off the people of the town and they take it, then that puts your town in jeopardy. And it may be even to the point of Superfund issues. Secondly,
So Jim,
I
can I interrupt you for just a second?
Yep.
Because these companies that were described in the article in Business Insider were actually in the process of doing one of two things. Either they were going to disassemble the panels and reclaim the components that actually have a market value. So the lead, the silver, all of the components that if you threw it into the environment in the raw, I suppose you would create a toxic mess. But these are actually, because of inflation and the increase in pricing, have economic value. And these companies are forming because clearly there's a stream of panels that are coming offline right now, some of the early adopted panels. And I'm wondering if you have an opinion. Are these companies real? Is Business Insider real?
Yeah,
This article
I
legit?
won't consider it to be real until they can take on and prove that they can take on the massive panels. Like I said, when you start having a tractor trailer truck an hour coming in to places like that, number one, that's a big concern. Number two is, what is the future cost of this is going to be? And number three, they aren't going to be able to separate a lot of that material without an incredible amount of energy to disassemble, disembark the various products that a lot of components
Okay.
eliminated with very toxic
So
stuff.
I hear you. You're saying that you disagree with the article on Business Insider when they're describing the process of recycling panels. Can I also ask you, do you disagree with Business Insider when they say that there is a whole market full of opportunity overseas for repurposing panels? Because there are markets where in the developing world where electricity prices are running at 4 or 5 times the cost of electricity here in the United States, a partially functioning panel actually has tremendous economic value. So there are other companies, some are partnering with these recycling companies that are packaging up panels, shipping them overseas and putting them back to work, even though they're not perfect, they're good enough to produce electricity in markets where the cost of a kilowatt hour is 75 cents.
So when you look at the cost of disassembling that, packaging it up, and the energy it's going to cost to ship it to another country, unpackaging it, setting everything up again, for what little energy you're going to get out of that, you're talking one heck of a lot of cost.
Listen.
But then you have the problem with the fact that now they're going to be stuck with the waste, and it's probably going to go back to the same countries where they are ravishing their countries because of the fact that they're having children taking, and they're the ones mining all these precious metals. And,
Well, Jim,
you know,
I can't, I'm just telling you what I read in Business Insider, which is
Yep.
to me, sort of a middle of the road kind of resource describing what's happening in the marketplace. I wouldn't consider that like a left leaning or a right leaning type of publication. I'm simply making a note that this was 2 weeks ago, and I share your concern with recycling. Can we move on to the issue of the Ponzi scheme?
yes.
Okay, so what is your opinion of the Maine Public Utilities Commission study that was done in 2018 on the cost of solar in Maine? Have you had a chance to read that?
And it said it's worth it. Oh, yeah. In fact, I filed a document for the governor. I was his technical advisor on energy. And I tore that apart, and I would be glad to pass that on to you.
Well,
And,
I'm always interested to compare notes to get to the truth,
Yep.
Jim, but you're aware that this particular study, the cost of solar in Maine, paid for by ratepayers, commissioned by the Public Utilities Commission in the state of Maine. It was a 2-year study that actually did the analysis about building out of solar in Maine and its effect on ratepayers and its effect on its doability on the grid in Maine. And maybe you could tell me a little bit about your impression of the findings that in the summertime, when solar panels are at peak production because the sun is highest in the sky and it's the hottest that it is, that the spot price for electricity, the added kilowatt hour that needs to be going onto the grid, sometimes reaches 32 cents per kilowatt hour. At least that's what it was in 2018. I'm sure it's a lot more right now because of inflation. So at that time, it was about double. The price doubles because people are running their air conditioning. We've got to get more energy on the grid. We have to run more expensive or less efficient means for producing electricity. And lo and behold, what this study discovered is that when you pay a standard offer rate to someone who is using solar panels to produce electricity, they're actually getting undercharged at that time because they're producing electricity when ratepayers would otherwise have to pay double.
So there's 8,760 hours in a year. The total amount of hours that you can benefit for that costly system to be installed is very small. Very few hours out of that 8,760 hours. You're right. During those few moments, those few afternoons in the summertime, relatively speaking, does not justify the rate pay of all that. Now, there's studies all the time, but they're always paid for by the industries that are going to benefit from the fact that I testified yesterday in Augusta on that power line going up to northern Maine. And I was the only non-paid person, the only one that could oppose it. And everybody else, that room was full of lobbyists and lawyers and special interests and marketers. And all the people there were getting paid because, and they're the ones that get the studies, and they're the ones that push the politicians. So
Okay.
I don't have much faith in that.
So Jim, you're aware that when this cost of solar study that was commissioned by the Public Utilities Commission, when that was published, there were 2 Republican appointees and 1 Democratic appointee on the Public Utilities Commission who actually authorized that study to be completed.
Yep.
Okay, well, I understand. And it sounds to me like you're disputing the conclusions of that study, even though,
Oh, yes.
again, it was sort of a middle of the road, not really biased group of people who were producing this study. You still want to dispute the conclusions of that study?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You know what?
Can I ask you one more question, Jim?
Let me just finish this and then
Give them a little more about
you
it.
can say one more. So, I I got a great big long list of a lot of these studies that were done by DOE, for instance, and I have a big long list of all these failures. They all said this was all, you know, the Solyndra type of things. There's a ton of those that were billions and billions of dollars. Everything was supposed to be great. Everything was supposed to be, you know, all vetted out. And yet every one of those things, big long list, have failed to the tunes of billions of dollars. And those guys at DOE are pretty smart. So what happens is too many politics involved with these decisions and these studies and so forth. So I don't hold a lot of faith in them. And it's pretty simple when you look at what those panels can do for Maine, getting us off fossil fuels. A 350 watt panel, which is a big panel here today, one of the new ones, and on average for the year, they only got 50% of their output. But you need 3 of them to run a 100 watt light bulb. The economics of this is very bad.
Can I make a suggestion? If this matter is put on the warrant, there'll be a public hearing. And we can hash this all out at a public hearing, not here tonight. We have a very long agenda and we need to move along.
What is the cost of that? We're looking to put solar panels at the town's cost, and the town is just what the whole.
Transfer station.
How much is this gonna cost the town?
I can answer that question. We will pay the bank for about 10 to 12 years, what we currently pay CMP. And then we will enjoy 8 years of free warranted performance of the solar panels. So we'll get free electricity. Currently, our bill is in the neighborhood of about $40,000. On top of that, you asked a question, I'm giving you an answer. On top of that, I'm sure everyone opened their electricity bill in January and understands what inflation is about. And so because the town owns those panels and it's located on town land, we would be inflation proof from any further electricity increases. I'm not expecting the electricity rates are going to go down anytime. They have not over the course of the last 50 years. Certainly over the next 20 years, I think it's a fair assumption to say that they won't on average. So the town would be no longer responsible for paying any increases in electricity expenses.
I guess my concern would be, am I hearing that we're gonna be like, based on a $200,000 house, our taxes go up as much as $600 this year, and we're still not sure about what's gonna go on with the school and the increases with that. We have this, what I consider a dump over here, just plow right over, we're gonna sink $120,000 a year to pay that back for
Agreed.
20 years. Where are we gonna stop this? Where are we gonna, I mean, why do we have to be the guinea pig to run out and do this like Jim's saying?
Well, we actually wouldn't be the guinea pig. There are actually communities that have been doing this for 10 years and they're getting free electricity and not having to pay CMP increases right now.
Directly in our face, how much can I afford? I mean, my CMP bill was a lot. Yeah, I agree. How much can we afford to continue increasing? I mean, all at once.
I completely agree. And that's actually the nexus behind this initiative.
So the answer to your question, the base price for that installation would be $566,721 that we would have to finance. If we finance it through a bank, we can take the money from the Inflation Reduction Act and pay it off at the end of it, you know, make a lump sum payment at the end. But if we do finance it through the bond bank, we cannot pay it off sooner. So we have to finance the full amount. We can't finance it minus what the government might give us in the Inflation Reduction Act. And if anybody listened to the last meeting, I have concerns about whether or not how that will perpetuate if something happens. So,
What's
that
looking like on a yearly tax rate coming up in the future of, looking, at what.
I totally get it when you read an article about the RSU possibly increasing by 5 to 8%. Yes, exactly. Already. So,
Can't afford it.
so the moral to my grandfather's story as a service technician and ran the service department for Davis Cadillac Olds was you never want to own the first model year.
Right. And
So,
Why do we want to be the guinea pig? Is there times, I'll let other people speak, but is there time to be had, we figure more out before we go jumping right?
there's no, to be first at the table for something. I totally am right there with you. So I think, what we're trying to figure out tonight is whether this will even go on to the warrant, whether or not we'll say it'll go on to the warrant. So to have folks here to talk about that, I think that's important.
I think we're here to talk about that. I think it's a table. I don't think we need to go all night. I think there's people here that.
Exactly, that are interested.
I just want to say, as residents, we voted for the select board. And I'm sitting here watching people's faces turn red because it appears to be a very personal opinion. And I want to remind, as a resident, looking at my select board saying, if you're getting this heated about a topic, that means you are now representing yourself on the select board and not the residents. So I need to put out there that you are representing us. So our voices are to be heard, not to watch you lose your shit over a guest speaker or
Cut him
have
off so he can
people
continue to.
or
talk.
have people get upset. I just want to remind you, let's keep it professional. And
course.
let's be appropriate and remind yourselves, you represent us.
Of course. So what questions are not being answered? And
You're
I'm,
getting it's a personal attack to talk about solar because the way you're presenting yourself, your body language is saying you're speaking on behalf of your own personal views and not on the taxpayers.
I beg to differ, and I think you and I have known each other for a long time, Buffy, so we can still be friends and have a difference of opinion.
Correct.
But when someone comes in and says things that are not true or that are contrary to other facts that I'm aware of, then I think it's important for those folks to answer some questions about what is true and where is it that we disagree. And so to say that the concept of using solar panels to insulate the town from future electricity increases and to pay for it exactly with the full amount that we are now paying our electricity bill to the tune of $40,000 is a fair statement. And anyone who says this is financially responsible should look at the spreadsheet and the numbers, because it actually means we pay what we're currently paying. We lock in, we don't have to pay CMP anything more if they come with increases. My face is not turning red. And by the way, after 10 to 12 years, we will enjoy $40,000 of today dollar benefit to the town. For
Can
at
I
least
make one more
years,
comment?
perhaps another 10.
Stan, you had something, your hand up.
Yeah, can I make one more comment?
No, someone else is speaking.
Somebody else wants to
Okay.
speak.
I'm sorry, yeah, let me know when.
My concern is, okay, we go down this road, and I'm not saying I'm anti-solar. But as an environmental compliance guy, I deal with a lot of recycling and a lot of those issues. And I will take anybody to task of what is our cost gonna be at the end of this 25 years when they've outlasted their.
Yep.
Because right now, solar panels are averaging $20 to $30 a piece to get rid of. For $2 to $4 worth of material that's in them. It's cheaper to get rid of them and bury them somewhere than it is to recycle. There's really not good plans out there. There are companies that are trying to make it. And I think a smart move would be wait and see, because my daughter lives here and she's gonna be the one that's gonna be paying to get rid of it. Okay, so there is an end date on this. So we can all swallow the pill right now and say, we're gonna save $40,000 a year
on the electric bill, we're gonna get it free for X number of years. But at the end of that, there's a big cost that no one knows what it is.
Well,
And that's gonna be right on the taxpayers, because at that point, we own it, and we gotta do something with it.
so there is a formula for figuring out what the cost is as it stands today, if we had to recycle them today. And we actually got some information from the vendor who bid the proposal for doing the install at the town transfer station. Their response was, you should budget about $25,000 for decommissioning costs to restore the land to what it was prior to the panels being installed. So I'm willing to include a $25,000 expenditure that we add into the project cost and set aside $25,000 in a reserve account so that it'll sit on the town books for 20 to 30 years until it's time to decommission these fields. And it can be periodically reviewed by the planning board as or by whomever is an expert. I mean, that's essentially what we are required to do by state law when we look at any solar proposal.
But and I just want to point out that with all these projects that are going on in the state, that's pretty much been a requirement that money has to get set aside.
Sure.
And just as a follow-up, if you get to that point, so for what we're really looking at is we're gonna spend $500,000 more or less for maybe 10 years worth of free power. And then we gotta tear it up and throw it away, or we're gonna rebuild it again for another, at that point, probably gonna be $1.5 million or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But what my point is, another point that I just want to point out is every single year, 6 months from now, the solar panels are gonna be built are better quality, better technology than what there is today.
Right.
And maybe we just pull back the reins, take a good look at it, because all of us as taxpayers are getting ready to swallow a big pill for the debt incurred next door, the big debt that's gonna be coming to the school. And do we really need to swallow this pill at this point? Maybe wait and see another year or two down the road, or 3 to 5 years or whatever, the technology that will be in the solar panels at that time is gonna be way greater. And maybe a solar panel at that point is gonna last 50 years instead of the 20 to 25 years that they're gonna last now. Because after 20 to 25 years, they're only 6 to 8% efficient. So, they become, they're basically junk at the end of that period.
Well,
So
the
maybe if
estimate.
we wait, the technology would be better than if we jump aboard today. That's
So,
where I'm
so
wondering.
just so you know, the warranted estimate for degradation is covered by a 20-year bond for these panels. So it's guaranteed to perform at a certain level. The warranty actually includes a 0.5% degradation. So if a panel degrades less than more than 0.5% per year, then we would actually have means to collect on that warranty.
Solar wells and postcards, so I'm very
Sure.
aware of all that stuff.
Sure. The other point I want to make to you is the issue of like increases in efficiency. I mean, at some point, we all need to make a decision. Is this make sense or does it not? Because otherwise we would never buy an automobile or never buy a house or never buy anything because we're waiting for the next best thing. The improvements that were cited by the industry as part of this proposal suggest that efficiencies are increasing at about 0.5% per year. So this is not leaps and bounds. This is incremental increases. Nothing huge on the and you know what? Increases in the level of technology don't matter when you're earning 10%, which is what we would be earning.
I would just like to challenge that increase thing, because when the fire department went up and on the ridge to that solar project, the next project they were doing, the solar panels were already 3 generations better than the ones that are installed on the ridge a year ago.
What's the efficiency though?
They're more efficient. They went up, like, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was like 100 kilowatts or whatever more per panel than what the panels they put up there. And that was right from the guys that built that plant. That's all I got.
I think this is.
I got a couple of bad shoulders in this. I just like to say, and I'm not gonna be quite as polite as Dan, This is a bad idea. The town has good ideas that are shown to it and bad ideas. This is a bad idea. Mr. LeBrecq is probably the foremost authority in the state. Quote any other place you want in the world. But 15 communities, as I understand it, have listened to what we're listening to now and said, we're not doing this. Trash. And if I understand correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. LeBrecq, or anyone else that knows, I believe even the city of Augusta, where our governor is pushing hard for this, has put a stop on it. Because they're finding out that these funds that are being set aside to take care of this in 25 years, they're not so sure that it's gonna work, that there's enough. So even like the city of Augusta, when we have to drive by that ugly crap, right by the Turnpike Mall and all that, the rest of the city, I can't believe they do it right up. But anyway, that's another story. That's another blight on the landscape. But anyways, knowing all that, like, just knowing that our own capital 20 minutes away is stopping, why would we even consider doing anything like that right now? It's a poor idea. This gentleman knows what he's talking about. I think we should listen to him, and I'd like to turn my time on the floor over to the very patient man from Green. I'd like to see what he had to ask.
Oh, just like everybody else here. I moved here in 97. And electricity was cheap. We had hydropower. Do we still have hydro dams here?
Yes.
I mean, I thought that was like the end all be all of renewable. Now they're doing away with it one by one. They're being decommissioned because of fish. Build more fish ladders. Right? No, am I not thinking about that the right way?
Thinking about it the right way.
Because
Hydro's 24/7.
that's right, 24/7. And winter, fall,
Yeah.
summer, spring, I am all favor for hydro and solar if they can do it. It doesn't sound like they're doing a very good job. I think we're being swindled. I really do. And I heard some of the numbers that you were saying. I don't really have that. I don't have any numbers. I try to find numbers, but it's hard to find them. I find an article here or I listen to somebody on the radio, but I try to find a lot of information as well because I'm curious about this, but these panels sound like they have a 20-year lifespan.
Warranted.
Okay, warranted lifespan. At the end of 20 years, is this toxic waste we're gonna be dealing with? And who's gonna be able to be dealing with that? How much is the cost of that? Are we gonna be shipping toxic waste out of here? And I heard that you said that we can box them up and send them to somebody else and make it their problem. A 20-year-old panel, give it to some poor country, you know what they're gonna do? They're gonna put it in the ground.
Or burn it.
Or burn it.
Listen, we have a small array here at the
Right.
top of the hill in Monmouth that is recycled panels. So they came from California. This is not just about sending it to some other place. This is about
Well, that's
finding
what I heard you
places
say,
where.
so that,
Well, there are
I'm just saying
companies,
that.
there are companies that are outsourcing to markets that have much higher electricity costs.
That's true.
And those panels are more valuable in those electricity markets. We have a neighbor over here at the top of the hill above the transfer station who paid pennies on the dollar to buy some panels and install a small array. Those were actually panels that were originally installed in like 1990 in
Right.
California, and he got a deal.
I understand, but that's him. I mean, you're talking about a whole town. We're looking at a town, right? I mean, how many panels are you guys looking at doing?
Yeah, I could get you the number, but it's on the scale of things, this is not a large, we're talking about less than an acre of panels.
Right.
We're talking about the installation of panels in the grassy area in the transfer station. It doesn't even register on the planning board's radar, meeting the definition of a medium or large size array. This is what's considered small, although our proposal would be to meet the standards for medium and large, even though the town by its own ordinances is not required to do that.
I'm the one, I know I'm the one that initiated all this tonight and got this ball rolling, and I know we've been dragging this on for quite a while. I know Jim had one more point he wanted to make, and then I would suggest we save a lot of this for the public hearing, which we know is gonna happen. Is everybody in agreement for that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Jim, you got one last thing you want to say?
two quick things. One, I want to thank you, and I think you all proven exactly what I opened up with, and that is there's a lot of controversy and a lot of reason to learn a lot more and discuss it further before you try and go be hasty into a decision. But one of the things that really irks me more than anything is when I hear about free stuff. There's nothing free. What happens is that all the costs, including all the costs to pay all of these out-of-state firms, the investment firms and contractors, foreigners, all of that is covered in what we call the permeation cost. So what happens is that electricity permeates every purchase you make. So when the cost of electricity goes up, the cost of your grocery stores use a lot, the cost of running your state and federal buildings, the cost of running your cities, the cost of your everything everywhere goes up. And you have to pay. The biggest part of that cost does not show up on your meter at home. It shows up in everything you buy. So the permeation factor is not considered in any of these studies that the PUC or anybody else did. And that's where most of the money is. The net energy billing, that is a big controversy right now, and it's really going to be bad news here for Maine is they estimated $7 billion above market cost is going to cost us. That $7 billion they're going to collect, but it's going to be a small part of it on your meter. The rest of it is going to go to every business, every fire department, every school district, everything. And your taxes for the towns go up, everything to pay for all of this free stuff. Thank you.
Okay, Jim, thank you very much. Thanks for chiming in, and I'll be in touch with you. Thanks for your knowledge.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
And thank you all for,
One quick question, where did you get your figures of 500,000 and?
Want
Oh,
copies
it was
of-
actually from the proposal from the
Yeah.
solar panel company.
Yeah,
Those numbers that you're getting are
What's
from a proposal
yeah,
from the company that
company.
wants to put solar panels
that's right.
in our town. correct?
Yes. Yeah,
Number one, so this is relevant. Took the liberty of printing off the budget, town budget, as of the first of this month. Our taxes going up, people. There's no doubt about it. Print it out, look at it yourself. Our taxes are going up. And we don't know yet the impact with Richmond getting out of the RSU two, what our budget's gonna look like for the school system. So let's table this.
One quick response. The RFP that you are citing
Mhm.
was something that all of us,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, 3-2, asked to be done.
Yeah.
And it was in response to a question posed by Chris, who said, we don't even know how much one of these things might cost and how the finances might work. So 6 months
But
ago,
you said it yourself, we're at a break-even point for the first 10 to 12 years at best.
cash flow break even.
Cash flow break even, okay? But now with the upcoming bills that we have in this town,
You'd like us to continue to pay increases to CMP and $40,000 a year.
we have an unknown in what happens at the end. There's not a lot of recyclable commodity in solar panel. And the labor to harvest the little commodity that they have. I mean, until we know for sure,
So
you're taking a step in the unknown.
you know, the impetus for us to move to get an RFP for this, it started last year with that question on there to enter a lease agreement to have somebody build a solar array at the transfer station. And that was on the ballot last year, which was approved to enter in a lease agreement, and we wouldn't own it. It would be owned by, and it was probably Revision that was gonna end up doing it. But anyway, and then, we'd have the opportunity to buy it at a certain point. And on the record, I was never for buying it and owning it, because when you own something, you own it. And then when the Inflation Reduction Act came out, we had already asked for an RFP to, you know, do a solar array at the dump that we would, sorry, the transfer station, that we would, you know, build. And then with the Inflation Reduction Act, it prompted a new RFP to figure that information into it. So that's how this all came about, you know, and on the record, it was, we were never going to own this when it was the initial conversation. So back last year when we were at this point.
So the lifetime, I mean, I'm a business person. I look at what's going to cost over the lifetime of the asset. What are the benefits over the lifetime of the asset? The response that we received from the RFP initially to either lease from a corporate owner who would build on the transfer station and still deal with, you know, all the problems that are being discussed tonight, or to just take 15%, I think it was 20% off of our bill and allow someone else to deal with it in Bucksport. Right, so we would buy a portion of a solar farm in Bucksport. In
At the
both,
paper mill.
yeah, at the paper mill, another industrial site. So when you do the analysis over the course of the lifetime of that proposal, the town would have saved about $108,000 over 20 years. When you do the analysis over the lifetime of actually owning the solar panels, qualifying for federal grants, and actually going through the process that we're doing this today, the benefit to the town would be about $500,000 over 20 years. $500,000 versus 108 over 20-year period. That's my cost benefit analysis. And that's why I think it's a good idea, sure. But I think it's a good enough idea at this point to be willing to put it on the ballot to let the voters decide. Because you know what? The voters have already said, okay, to the first thought, which was to have a corporate person put it on the transfer station and then lease it back to the town and take about $400,000 of the benefit for their time.
Part of the problem with the ballot, Ken, is it has a suggestion by the board. People aren't even reading the questions. Some people don't understand what they're even voting for. I come across that every day. Board, you know, approved, but the planning board might approve it 3-2. Doesn't mean the whole planning board approved it, but it's not that you gotta get that off the ballots because people aren't reading the
There
questions.
has to be a suggestion on there for financial questions. That has to be there, but it doesn't
How do
say,
how
you
do
know,
make
3-2.
people read questions?
I
Well, that's-
totally understand.
That's, we used to have town meeting where we used to discuss.
Yes,
Things and debate things.
yeah.
And that's the type of government we have. We have a town, we have a legislative body, town, in the town meeting, and it's done by ballot. And we tried to overturn that some time back, and it was unsuccessful. People wanted the ballot. They don't want to sit there all day and listen to the debate. It's regrettable, but that's what happened.
Some of us has been hearing this for 4 months now,
Yeah.
you know, and it's the same thing. That we've heard the same thing week after week after week at a selectman meeting. And, you know, I mean, there are options for these people that are here tonight, which is great. This is the first time we've had this many people in this room. It's been 2 people public. Here we are, you know, and we have this, you know, it's been going on.
Are they still yelling?
On the Chelsea is the next one on the block, chopping block. I understand that they put a moratorium and stopped it. So Chelsea just stopped doing it, and their representative in that area, Mike Levinson or something like that. He's looked a lot at the data that Mr. Levesque has and so forth and said, this is not a good idea. So I would implore you not to put it on the ballot in June. I don't think it's a good idea. You know, it needs a hearing. I do agree with Mr. O'Donnell that it was a shame that we ever crashed getting together. And for those people that didn't want to sit all day, well, don't come. The rest of us will.
We all were
I
there.
remember when when I was a kid, I used to get over at 10 o'clock at night, and I have no problem if it does that again.
Yeah.
Sounds important. You need to do the business.
So we go on to, we want to The next thing is to hear a request from the planning board. And
Well, I'm hoping, I got all from the planning board, we have just about everyone that's on the planning board here. And I'm kind of promoting something that I think will be hopefully revenue neutral. And I kind of gave you a summary. For years, the planning board has lacked appropriate administrative support to really do what we're charged to do, which is to, whether it's to review solar projects where you have engineers come in and people advocating, and we're sitting there and we're trying to understand what's going on. We have no one to take minutes. And it's impossible for a board member to sit through, I think, a discussion and take meaningful minutes about technical issues of cost or kilowatt hours or phosphorus being created. And so we're asking the select board to authorize funds for administrative support. It started out when I was first on the planning board. We had someone on the town office staff who did this. And it made a lot of sense. It was in-house. Documents were stored at the office. We could find them. We had more code enforcement. There was someone who was working with the administrative staff to make sure things got done, whether they were agendas or notices to abutters or public notices. We just don't have that anymore. And it is creating a lot of frustration, I think, on the part of
board to have.
on the board, to have the kind of support we need. Another additional concern is, if I understand correctly, with Andy, we're getting 10 hours a week code enforcement of down.
In the office, that's the idea, yeah.
And, years ago, we came to the board and said, the code enforcement officer should be at the planning board meetings, should go on site visits, should screen the applications so we know, is this something we need to decide because we only meet once a month? Or is it something the code enforcement officer? Once Dave Shaw left, I would get a call, 2 calls, 3 calls a week. And it's, from my standpoint, a waste of time. I'm a volunteer. I enjoy doing the planning board work, but some of this cost has to be borne through the town. And I think one way we can cover more hours for the code enforcement, more administrative support, is we look at our fees, which I don't think have been changed probably in 15 years. We have something come in like a solar project. Our fee schedule really doesn't fit that anymore. I mean, these people are coming in, there's a lot of money, as we're hearing, being made on that, and we can get some of that money through fees to cover these costs that we need. I mean, I understand the planning board minutes haven't been updated in 2 years. So that can create a problem if we have someone file an appeal and we go to court and we don't have proper records maintained. It's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to cost a lot more to pay attorneys to go to court than it's going to pay somebody $20 an hour to come and take minutes, help people coming in, give them the right application. We had code enforcement officers that we hired, and they were giving out building permit applications and not the proper applications. We'd have people come in, they're upset, and I'd say, you don't have the right application. And they said, well, we filed it. Well, they filed it, but no one was sending it to me, to say, hey, when we go to do the agenda, which I don't think I should have to do, we find out these problems, and then we're running ragged before a meeting trying to pull things together. So I don't know what it would cost, whether it's $10,000, but I think a lot of it, if we can get enough hours so that we can get someone to drive around the town? Or are people doing things without a permit? If they were doing it with a permit, there'd be a fee generated to make sure we're not putting on a deck that's gonna collapse, people get hurt. You know, the fees are gonna cover this. So I think it's something that really needs to be done. It's, there's just been a real deterioration in sort of the administration. I'm not laying the blame here because it happened, I think, because of predecessors, that the attention that was needed just wasn't given to, you know, how do we run a good planning department and enforcement department? I know Ray and I have a couple comments.
Covered the bases very well, but I will add that the reason I requested for the planning board to be on this evening's agenda is because the planning board, these issues have reached a critical mass. Plain and simple as that. Something is going to explode. So.
I can give you another example. You know, the last solar project we just reviewed, we had to send notices out to abutters. And when I went to check where the notices sent, well, no one could find any green cards that come back. So they said, well, let's look at the code enforcement officer had left that was there for 2 months or whatever. The notices were all in the drawer. They hadn't been sent out.
And
So-
then, not only that, there was, I had to rush, give it an hour's time to get the public notice to the paper, to get it in on time to do the public hearing.
And then,
That was missed.
and then the notice he prepared was faulty. You know, so it was, and these things, I mean, luckily, everything fairly went smoothly. The neighbors had a chance to come in, see what was going on, make comments, but, you know, that one was lucky. It didn't create a problem, but I think if we don't address some of the problems, I've heard there's been buildings that have been constructed in town without a permit. That's,
So my two questions are, Andy, are you at a point that you'll be able to attend the planning board meetings?
No, it's really not, it's not part of his agreement.
It's not
for this.
part of his
Right.
agreement,
The
okay.
problem with codes is, like we've discussed before, these people don't exist. It's not, you could give me all the money in the world and I won't be able to find anybody to fill the job. They're not available. So what towns are doing, like I was just in Woolwich the other day discussing something with Kim Dalton, their town administrator. Their code enforcement officer has 0 hours. He's totally by appointment and works remotely completely. And that's the best they could do in their community. I think that we got lucky to get Andy to be willing to, basically to give us some hours at all. And we're gonna try to do the best we can. I think we have to come up with, we're having trouble with the recording secretaries, right? Because I'm doing your minutes now, because we don't have one for this board either. And I don't know whether we would be, whether it would be beneficial to potentially split that. So maybe we might be able to find somebody that is willing to just do, you know, minutes for this board, but maybe we can find somebody separate who's willing to put in more hours to give you more administrative support. So it's not, you know, because the people, when we put down it's a recording secretary, usually they're thinking that they can do it from home, you know, after their normal 8 to 5 job when they have time and get you the minutes, you know, every other week. And the same with you, but what you're looking for is somebody that is gonna potentially be in the office occasionally to help you get your packets together, send out the mailing. So I think maybe we want to consider separating those so that we're not giving somebody sort of a false expectation and then giving you a false expectation that the recording secretary is gonna do all this, you know, the mailings and put the packets together, because they're not really the same thing.
How's it handled in other towns with planning boards and minutes and packets and agendas?
It depends, right? Like some communities that have full-time clerks, they're the secretaries for the select board and all of the other thing, and that's part of their general duties. Winthrop has a full-time code officer and he does the packets and sits on their planning board meeting, but he's full-time. So it's kind of all over the place. I can't say that there's a particular way that this is done anywhere. Every community has its own kind of culture.
Andy, do you have availability to do more hours than the 10?
Yeah, so Justin and I had chatted. That's the thing. I mean, it depends on what you guys are looking for. Basically, what, obviously David done in the past. I mean, he was working full time. I mean, he was able to do a lot of other stuff, because he had the time. So my concern, which I had brought to Justin, with all this coming up, just to kind of get his take on it and see whatever, is that, there are a few more hours I can do. We would probably have to negotiate that as far as what I'm getting paid, because when we first talked, it was based on, less hours, but I have no problem zooming into the planning board meetings once a month if I need to. I understand they have to work closely with the CEO, obviously, for, obvious reasons and stuff. There's gonna be questions that they want to know, answers to let them do their job. But at the same time, secretarial stuff, Justin and I were just talking about that today. It doesn't make sense to have me necessarily doing that if someone else can, just for the simple fact that right now it's been great because it hasn't been that busy. I've been able to kind of catch on and start doing the stuff. But once things really get rolling, I mean, I'm going to have a stack of paperwork that I have to do for code enforcement specific stuff. I'm really just not going to have time within the hours we're talking about to do all of that as well. So to answer your question, yeah, I could potentially have that conversation about more hours, but depending on what it is, yeah, you potentially would have to find someone else if you're talking, 20, 30 hours a week, because I certainly can't do that with my current workload.
The Andy's hourly situation, if he had some level of administrative assistance, like he just stated, there's a lot of paperwork involved, that he could delegate it to somebody, which would free up his time to do code enforcement functions. So I don't understand. I need somebody to explain to me why a person cannot be a recording secretary and also function as the coordinating individual between code enforcement and planning board out of the town office, make sure that everything filters down through like it should.
And when we advertise for recording secretaries in today's day and age, they don't want to ever come here. They want to do it from Zoom on when they have free time, and they watch the meetings after the fact and they take the minute. That's what your recording secretary have been doing here, basically through COVID, and then afterwards, that's how they want to do it now. They all have other jobs. It's a little side job for them to make a little extra money, every other week or whatever. So they're not interested in coming into the office and photocopying things and putting packets together. So that's
hearing that we don't have any resumes from anybody that would be willing to do this?
That's correct. The last two people we've hired, there were one, maybe two applicants when we put it out.
But I'm talking currently in the town office.
I don't think that we formally advertised it, but other than when we did just the last time before the person quit. We hired somebody that we hired and they never actually
I
started.
think he's asking if somebody that already works at the town office.
Yes.
No, that's not what I'm asking.
Oh, okay. That's
We only
what I-
have two people at the front.
I know for a fact.
No, we
that
used to have
there's at
three.
least one resume sitting in the town office, possibly more.
Yep.
And with those resumes, they were looking at what, just being a recording secretary or what were they looking for?
No, I'm saying in the past, when we've formally gone out to hire the person for this board, this time we didn't do it for this board because we went back and Lori's talking with the person. It was the other person that applied last time that we didn't choose. So we've gone back and talked to that person and she's negotiating with that person right now. And I believe there's another individual who is interested in doing the planning board work. So we have kind of these people in the queue. It's just we haven't, I don't think that the interviews have been formally set up yet. That's all.
Yes, you.
Can I ask a question about staff? I always thought it was rather strange in an era in the town when we went from 40 hours to 32 hours for our administrative folks down there. I'm willing to put money that some of those folks might be interested in more than 32 hours. And we're listening to need. Has anybody asked I'm not being sexist, but the girls down at the town office. People put money, someone's interested in some time.
I think some of them are and some of them like their
Some of them aren't and some of them aren't.
different answers, and I've heard them from both sides, so yeah.
But there's a possibility.
Do we have authority to set the fees for these permits?
I
Or
believe that there's an ordinance that gives you the authority to, normally you would need the town to do it. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that there's an ordinance that
we
gives you the.
changed it so that the select board could change the fees. I mean, the thought
Right.
was every couple of years, and it, one of the things that kind of fell by the wayside, but rather than have the fees in the ordinance itself, we thought it made more sense. You
Okay,
wouldn't
yeah.
have to amend the ordinance that give the select board the authority to set fees.
Dave, I thought we had adjusted fees not very long ago.
You adjusted fees the wrong way.
Yeah, because we went to third-party inspectors, we
Third-party.
went to third-party inspectors, and so we changed the
So you
fees
changed the fees
dramatically that.
because of that.
Because of that.
But prior to that, we hadn't changed the fees in a couple of years. I mean, we probably, in 18 years, we probably changed the fees twice.
So perhaps after we get through,
And I think
Developing-
because of the mailings, it was mailings that drove that change of fees. 'Cause the newspaper went from $100 a posting, now it's $325 to put, 2 sentence word, posting it.
Certified mail has gone up.
And certified mail now is probably tripled from when I first started. It was $2.50, now it's $9 or something.
Rick?
Yeah, so like Steve said, maybe we could increase planning board fees. That wouldn't affect the building permit fees. Because we're already gonna be paying third-party inspector and then, the building and plumbing permits. But our planning board fees are really, really inexpensive. It's not
yeah, I don't think I've ever looked at those, so I think probably if we put together that to have on the agenda after we've come up with and completed the warrant for June. Have that on the agenda, once we.
We've been kicking it around the planning board, and I think probably by our June meeting, we would have maybe even a recommendation.
That'd be great. Yeah, but
In the meantime, can we budget for approximately $10,000 expense to fund some staffing need for the planning board, and then on the revenue side, budget approximately $10,000 to offset that.
And Board of Appeals.
yeah.
Yeah.
Planning.
Yeah. I think that we can make it work with what is already in there because of our uncertainty about who our code officer was and so on and so forth. We have money
Some.
in the code's budget, not knowing how many hours we were gonna be able to find and all that stuff.
And Andy is a certain guy. I mean, he's not going to be disappearing like.
No.
Writing.
I'm not a magician. I won't be made do any disappearing acts. I do want to add one thing that I was thinking of when he mentioned it though, about having the person drive around, whoever this was, drive around and find violations. That, my opinion, that wouldn't fall on that. That would be on me. But at the same time, if I'm not doing these administrative things that are taking up a lot of time right now, believe it or not, there is quite a bit of that takes up a lot of time now already. I will be able to then go around and deal with that other stuff, which I should be doing, and doing that. But no, I don't have any plans to run away as long as we can make it work within my schedule. I think things will be fine and we should be good there.
Good.
Thank you. So why don't we look at that and then find out whether, the 2 resumes we have, if something works there, or if we ask in-house to see if anybody's willing to work and do the paperwork
Yep, sure.
with Andy.
Does that entail job description that anyone in the house might have been hired under?
No.
Okay.
And we have less people out front than we even had when Dave was here. There used to be 3, there's only 2 there now. There just isn't as much availability to kind of get away from the counter. You know, when someone takes a lunch, there's one person. So it's hard. What I'm looking at is, when can we expect a recording secretary? That's what I'm looking at. Bottom line. As soon as we can get somebody on board at this point.
Way back when the Monmouth had an assistant code enforcement officer, I don't know if anybody remembers that or not, but would that be something that could be a possibility too? You know, someone pick up some hours that he can't do to like get the paperwork done, get the mailings done. you know?
We're looking for unicorns here.
Right.
So we've got a unicorn right now.
And we want-
And we're gonna get this unicorn, because we hopefully, yes. And like, we've been through this, 4 times, so we know that there just aren't people out there doing it. And, you know, we're happy to have Andy because he looked at a need and decided he wanted to fill it. So unless somebody else gets that same motivation.
It might be someone that's not, doesn't want the full code enforcement officer, someone might be willing to do, you know, a few more hours. you know.
I kind of have somebody in mind for that. I won't say anything out loud because I haven't talked to him, but I kind of fooled around with an idea there, so I might reach out to some.
And if anyone else has ideas
Exactly,
for
but
someone like that, would be open.
I think if we can get the administrative stuff taken care of that, again, I know I'm early in the game here, but I don't think we'll need more help just to do the code enforcement stuff is my take on it personally.
Can I say one quick thing? It's not so much having Andy come to the meeting or do Zoom. What's lacking for the planning board is continuity between the codes office and the meeting with paperwork.
Yeah.
When the meetings were at the town office, how many times did I get up from my chair, go into the office, go to the file room, get a file, bring it back so they could act on the meeting? Now it's postponed a month. So somebody can go to the town office, get the file out of the file cabinet and bring it to the next meeting because they have no continuity. Or to know ahead of time that they're gonna need to bring it to this building to have the meeting, like I did at last meeting. It wouldn't have been here. They wouldn't have been able to act on it because the old file was in the file room. That's the-
Question, how
that's
big,
what you need.
how big typically are these are the planning board meetings?
How big are they?
Yeah, how many people?
Oh, well, it depends on the meeting. Like we had one last month and we had people here.
So you need a big room for something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But for a
But-
typical,
but a lot,
you
you
know,
know,
someone asking
It's
shoreline zoning, I need a
Yeah.
special permit by rule thing.
Yeah, those are 5 people meetings, you
Well,
know,
I'm just wondering if,
the board outnumbers the audience.
right, I'm just wondering if you could use the conference room at town hall instead of using this room, so you can get the convenience that Dave is referring to.
Is that room even there though?
There is a conference room.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
there is a conference room, a table about half the
Half.
size of this one.
We have to
And
make adjustments to the building because we don't have doors that we can leave open that people can then lock.
Exactly.
You know, they're all twist type thing. So
Even that front building office was available. That was good because we didn't have, you know, we could have a meeting, wouldn't have to get beyond the magic door.
Yeah.
magic door,
Now there's 2 magic doors. So,
magic door and
yeah.
I see Noel.
Yeah.
I was gonna look around, see if I could find a used copy machine that someone might donate. It would be useful to have a copy machine here.
Yes, it would. We've run into that.
yes, we've thought about it. It's on the list of something to buy for up here.
Yeah,
At least a bigger
But I
printer
didn't
that
want
can
to
do.
do too many different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
No.
it's on my radar screen. We're just trying to find something that's reasonable. To maybe put out there.
yeah.
Okay, so, Ray,
I guess my last comment is if it hadn't been for the extra time and effort that our chair person has put in, we wouldn't be discussing the solar array ordinance at this point in time. So I think it's just, hopefully your board will recognize and appreciate the time and effort that Steve has devoted to the town of Monmouth. Because he has devoted a serious amount of time on a couple of years. With that said, just waiting for a recording secretary.
Well, I think you're always involved in stuff that's going on with the planning board. You're kind of an exception also, I think.
That's good or bad.
That's good.
Thank you.
So can we,
So
we,
we need a motion for this, or are we just taking, okay,
we're just gonna do a
so,
public hearing on the budget?
no,
No,
we've got to
that's
do the
solar.
solar development ordinance. Don't skip over.
Number 7. Oh, you must have brought the first one, yeah, here. I got
That's right, this is the amended agenda.
All right.
That's why, yeah,
Okay,
that's
so,
all right.
oh no, we gotta do this.
We had enough of solar for one night.
This is the conservation.
This is minor in comparison. Maybe not the amount of work it took, but for the.
We can be quick on that.
Don't make our ears bleed
Yeah,
anymore
well,
tonight.
You may remember in what, was it November, December, there was the group came in and asked for a moratorium.
Yes.
And I think the discussion was, let's try to get something going. We did have one project in the pipeline, which has now been approved, but I think a number of people, you have sometimes you pass one of these ordinances until you really see a project, you don't understand really how it's gonna fit into the town, or what issues might arise. And so I think the Conservation Committee was good because they gave us a little push, and some of us on the planning board had also, the experience of, gee, wouldn't it be nice if we could tell them they had to do this or couldn't do that? And so out of that, we had Doug and a couple people from the planning board, Conservation Commission, and we came up with some changes. We had people come in from Maine Farmland Trust who are obviously interested in preserving agricultural use of land. We looked at a lot of different town ordinances. And rather than scrap what we had, we just wanted to make some adjustments. And I think the primary concern is, our comprehensive plan says we should preserve the rural nature of our community. That has been the overwhelming, and we do polls, surveys, that's what comes back. And so this graph that we propose increases setbacks, greening of these projects as, you've met, some people have mentioned the things they're doing in Augusta and the interstates. There's no screening, there's no buffers, it's just there. And so this really, we're trying to limit the visual impact, put some requirements on siting. One that may be controversial, I don't know, is we're a little concerned about density. Are there going to be areas in the town that get overly burdened with these? These companies are chasing these projects for good or, everyone says solar is great. We've heard some concerns about it tonight, but people are being offered a lot of money to lease their land.
Or sell it outright. I got 2 letters last week.
We all got letters.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and there's people who have signed, and there is research going on in town. So we wanted to kind of get this out there. Buffering, I think, is one of the most important things, and that's what we really tried to tighten up and maybe make the setbacks larger. We did put in that an abutting owner could agree to a lesser buffer
down to 50 feet. We're recommending a buffer of 200 feet. And I think, or a setback of 200 feet. And I think with the buffering, we're suggesting these projects will be better screened from public view and maybe less offensive. We are also trying to promote dual agricultural use where people can bring in sheep. They might be able to have bees. They might still be able to mow certain areas. So we're not mandating it, but we're, let's say, more strongly encouraging agricultural and what we're calling habitat enhancement, that we're trying to get some additional benefit out of these projects. So that's sort of it in a nutshell. I mean, a bunch of us here who could probably answer questions. But we tried not to make it too complicated, but we have a pretty good, there's been talk about decommissioning, and the way that works now in the present ordinance is, you come up with a figure. Yeah, what's it going to cost now to build in inflation? And we don't want the town to bear any burden. So the state has actually, when we first passed our ordinance, the state hadn't put in their regulations on decommissioning. They have now, and it's a choice of whether the decommissioning expense or the bond goes to the town or the state. We've opted on the two projects we've approved to have the bond payable to the town, just to make sure, have some local control over what happens. Not rely necessarily on what somebody in Augusta says.
On the dual use on these, a lot of areas that communities not even going there. Not touching. What we did is we gave these companies an incentive. For example, if they do set their solar farm up with the dual use, whether it be grazing or for vegetation. So we're a little flexible, I think. I think there's some other area. Yes. Thank you for hustling this forward so we can put it on the ballot and have it in effect as soon as practical. I appreciate all the hard work that people have done. Pull all the moving parts together and stick to the timeline that's required by the election laws. The project that was recently approved in South Monmouth, does that comply with?
It probably doesn't have the, it doesn't. We got them to agree buffering in areas that the ordinance didn't. So one of the problems we found is that there was a buffer from the road, but only where the primary driveway was. So they could have said, no, we're not going to do it, but they agreed to put buffering, screening in on all four sides. They agreed not to use herbicides because one of the neighbors is the organic farm, the milk cows. Their buffers don't require, we're suggesting 2 rows of trees that are staggered, so you won't have a gap. We're tightening it up that a maintenance plan has to address the trees so that if the trees die, and one of the things we learned when we went up and looked at
the one on the Ridge Road is they planted the trees last spring and quite a few of them died. They're telling us they're gonna replant them. Another reason we need code enforcement, somebody has to know that they gotta do this, and if you don't, you know, there's a price to pay. So we got something out of, to answer your question, we got something out of concession. But this is a little stricter than, you know, their buffers are maybe 20 feet on the abutters and 50 feet on the road. So we're saying 200 feet everywhere, except you can go to 50 feet to a neighbor who agrees to it.
And what is it they're budgeting for disposal of this 8-acre site?
I think it starts out at 16,000 and at 25 years, that is 64,000.
Yeah, 64,000 after 25. So they don't need to pre-fund it. They just need to make sure they have the right amount at the end.
Right, they'll be paying premiums on an insurance policy payable to the town.
And is there some sort of review process?
Well, a bond has to be filed with the town. I think the state law now is every 5 years.
I'm not sure about
The bond has to be reviewed. And I think they're looking at, you know, what you guys have heard about tonight is what's gonna happen with recycling disposal. So the state decommissioning law, I'm pretty sure, requires kind of a 5-year reassessment.
Would our auditors be checking every 5 years?
The auditors?
Not the town, the state would be though. The state, I think, is by statute required to run that process.
They've got to file something with the town annually to show that they've got an existing policy in effect.
I was a member of the committee. It was interesting to work with Steve and Andy Smith of Milk House and Ray. And Bonnie, who was always zooming in.
So we just need an amendment to, I mean,
You
a motion.
you can do it tonight to add it to the warrant, or I can just add it in knowing that you want it, and then when you approve the warrant next meeting, whichever way you want to do it, it's fine.
I make a motion, we add the requested amendments to the site review ordinance for solar projects to the town warrant in June.
I don't know if you've got the draft that I sent, the warrant item draft.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
I didn't know, I tried to do some type of explanation, it might have been too wordy, but feel free to edit.
Well, you always look at these and go through them with the attorney to make sure they're what they're supposed to be anyway, so,
Anything that's an ordinance or a bond, I always send it to the attorney.
yeah.
There
So we'll have
are,
another lawyer look at it. Ms. Green,
yeah, I just noticed that there are, in the actual language of the ordinance, there are a couple of errors. They're not serious and they need to be addressed. They should not go whole cloth right into the warrant. They just need to be checked. That's all. The grammar
said by an
police,
English teacher.
the grammar police is here and
But I thought we did that at the last meeting.
the draft that I looked at that Steve sent out, there were some errors. That it happens, you know, that's okay. But I also, the explanation that Steve did, I think was wonderfully done and very comprehensive and makes it very clear what it is. And I think the committee did a really good job. Reed Field, for example, is very, very strict. Bodenham, not so much. And so we kind of tried to wed those into ours. But I think we did a good job personally, but I just want to make sure that the draft is checked one more time, because you don't want people, someone will read that warrant in June and come out of the booth and say, there's an error. And, so we have to make sure.
We'll
Okay,
have
that's
the
it.
grammar police look at it one more time.
That's a, Major, I'll do a double check with you.
There you go.
The two English teachers can look at it together.
So there's a motion by Ken.
And I'll second it. I don't know if I had a chance to second it.
So that made a motion and Chris seconded that we put the solar ordinance changes on the ballot or
With the recommended
with the recommended corrections,
grammar corrections.
whatever is needed. Okay. Okay,
Sounds good.
okay.
Yes.
So all those in favor?
Mark's voting yes.
Thank you.
I just want to make one more pitch, which is, I hope there's something in the budget for the comp plan. Hopefully we can. Now that we've got the solar,
Now,
we want to move on to get the comp.
right
plan.
now, there's about 10 grand in there. I don't.
So that should be, good.
Okay,
thanks.
yeah.
Thank you for your hard work, everybody.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, on to public hearing for the municipal budget.
I just had one question. Where are we with the cleaning company and what we're
So,
deciding?
with the cleaning company. So what's proposed in here is to eliminate the cleaning contract and
Yes,
move it to an in-house person, which is basically an even swap in cost.
okay. All right. I just didn't know where we were with that, whether we were,
Yep, so if
you
that.
started investigating that or.
Yeah, so that one I looked, that packet I gave you tonight is just high level. It doesn't have all the,
Doesn't have the.
but it's under the
thing.
buildings section on the admin budget.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So if you have the one with all the
Yes, it
details,
was like 32 or whatever.
something like that,
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
And the cleaning contract would have been 40, so even with benefits, it's a
We
break
still-
even.
And where are you with doing a ad for that or advertising for that?
I would feel comfortable to advertise it once you sign the warrant and I know that you're gonna go for it.
Okay,
Because I wouldn't want to, I can't do anything until
Okay,
July
all right,
anyway, but I
all
will
right.
do it as soon as I can. So
Okay.
hopefully we have somebody on board for July.
okay. So we're gonna use the cleaning company through the end of this fiscal year.
Yes,
Okay. And how's that going?
it's a struggle.
Okay, that's what I thought.
The turn is still here from 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
We're not paying for it.
They
though.
have the same problem
Yeah.
everybody does. Someone
Same
calls out
thing.
sick, they don't have anybody to do it, so they
Mhm.
send somebody real quickly to change the trash in the buildings and they blow everything else off. So it's just,
Yeah.
it's a struggle.
Are we still paying for it? We're not paying.
We pay for it, we get credits when we can notice it or prove that they didn't come. Sometimes it's hard in the town office because they do come through on that, but we know they're not doing this, so every once in a while we make a call about, hey. It's hard to keep track of them all.
I thank you for communicating with Mark on the undesignated fund balance.
Sure.
And I think we probably ought to review those figures just so that everyone
Yep.
and the public gets to understand where we stand and.
I have his email here somewhere, if I can find it for you, Ben, at the bottom of my file.
I'll keep us.
And because I think we have some new folks in the audience, maybe you want to review for us what exactly is the undesignated fund balance?
Well, the unassigned fund balance is the new term.
Okay,
And what that is, it's the amount of money that's sitting in the town's checking account, bank account that is extra from previous years. So when we don't spend all the money from a previous year, all the money on
Gentlemen,
all the money on June
distracting us.
30th lapses into the unassigned fund balance. So it basically falls into a savings account, if you would. It's not really, but that's how you can think of it. So there's a certain amount of unassigned fund balance that is absolutely necessary for the town to have because it is what carries the town in between tax payments. So if we have a healthy amount of fund balance, we don't have to go out and borrow money, say, right now, when the tax payments are due very shortly. Right now, we would have run out of money from the last time, making payroll, paying the schools, all that. So we have to keep a certain amount in there. And we also want a certain amount in there in the event that there's some type of economic crash or crisis where our revenues for excise and all the other that aren't property tax related don't show up. So that's what would carry us through until we could rectify the situation. So with the let me see, let me see where I want to start reading this because he's very detailed. So I'll just, he made estimates based on the year that we're currently in. So he's annualizing. So he's looking at what we've spent so far with the history of how much we've spent, and he's projecting what we would have as of June 30 of this upcoming year. So if we were to this is his words, this is Mark, our finance director. If we were to annualize most things, except for items like debt service and one-off, otherwise non-annualized items, and come up with a rough idea of where the town will end up at the end of fiscal year 23, the result is the town currently on pace to end the year somewhere between a $36,000 deficit and a $50,000 surplus. So to be conservative, let's actually assume it ends with a $50,000 deficit. That would mean that at the ending fiscal year 23 assigned fund balance would be around 1.8 million. That accounts for the money that you withdrew last year, which was primarily the 600,000 that you took out of fund balance to do paving, which won't be done this year because it got pushed because of weather and so on and so forth last year.
Supply chain.
Yeah, supply chain issues. So at that point, so the 1.8 million is basically our 2-month threshold. It's the amount of money that's typically how much you want in your fund balance is amount to cover 2 months worth of the total expenses of the town, including school payments and all the bills that run through the town office. So at this point, it's really a question of how much under the 2-month expenditure rule of thumb you want to be at. This is his words. The 1.8 million would already include the 200,000 budgeted use of surplus, which is already in the budget. So that's that 1.8 includes the 200 that's already in the budget that you've had in front of you all along to buy down the tax rate a little bit. So that's kind of where we are. So that's the amount that we're at right now with the fund balance. So there's not a lot to play with there this year, but you certainly can determine the amount of risk that you're willing to have if you want to take any more out of there.
It seems like one of the expenditures that we're contemplating is simply it's more of a saving. We're putting money in a piggy bank kind of expenditure, and that has to do with well, actually some of the stuff that we've talked about tonight in terms of code enforcement not being there to check to make sure that people got their permits, and do we have a lot of unpermitted for right or for wrong. And I know sometimes when we didn't have a code enforcement, people were building without a permit because we didn't have a code enforcement person. So there's no judgment here when I say unpermitted building. But what that ultimately means is unpermitted building that happened in the last couple of years has resulted in unrecognized tax revenue. Right? It's not on the assessment. It's not on the property card. So the only way to capture unrecognized tax revenue, unpermitted building, is to actually go through a revaluation where the town periodically hires a contractor to go and, knock on people's doors, every property, every parcel, check to what's noted on the property card versus what's actually there in the physical world, and then make an assessment that's based on ratios and industry standards and all this other stuff. Then there's, the whole process of someone feels like they're being unfairly assessed, then they can do that too. So we've talked about the necessity for that. We built into the budget a revaluation reserve fund for $75,000. And that is essentially setting aside $75,000 to save up for the $200,000 to $300,000 that it actually takes to pay for revaluation. It has been, we haven't actually had boots on the ground doing revaluations for about 17 years. So there's 17 years of time that's gone by since someone has gone around and put everybody on the same page with regard to what is the condition of the property? How big is your deck? Yada, yada, yada. Anyway, we felt the need to start saving up for this. Certainly the sooner we can get to being able to afford it done, the sooner we can get to sort of an even keel with folks paying their fair share and knowing that it's a fair share. I would suggest that that we not ask the taxpayers to pay $75,000 this year to save up for the expenditure, but instead go to the unassigned fund balance and say, can we set aside a large chunk of this? It'll still be in a savings account. It'll still be cash on the books because we're not spending it yet, right? So it'll still be there if there's a cash flow issue in September when we're waiting for tax bills to come in. But my suggestion would be to say, okay, let's take the unassigned fund balance. My opening suggestion would be $200,000 of it. Set it aside in a reserve account and begin the process. It takes about a year or two sometimes to actually hire a contractor, go through the RFP process and begin the revaluation process. And we really don't want to put the cart before the horse in terms of not starting that process unless we got the cash. So my suggestion would be, can we use $200,000 of the undesignated fund balance to begin that process, begin the RFP process, and then potentially look at a revaluation in 2024 as opposed to where we currently are, which is like 2025 or 6. Thoughts on that?
If I had all the money right now and I went out to RFP, it would be very unlikely that we would get a reval done for effective April 1, 2025. We're probably looking at 2026 right now anyway. If I had some amount of money so that I could go out to RFP, I could start that process to get us in the queue, because I could say that the town has started to set money aside, and by the time we would have to start actually paying a vendor, we would have some money available. So these things are often the way you get the most responses to your RFPs and needs is if you give them 2 years to complete it. So if we put some money away this year and you wanted me to go out to RFP, say next spring, not this one, then I could do that with like an expectation date of 2026, and we may be able to get a vendor sort of in line to start at either the end of 24 or the beginning of 25, and then they would take that 18 months to 2 years to get that information into it. We don't need it really on April 1st. We need it by the date we commit. It's much later than that. So if they started, then they'd have a full 2 years. So I think you could, 10 suggestions fine, or you can do any amount sort of under that just gives the impression that the town is moving that way. So I could do an RFP. So whatever you're comfortable with.
And if the RFP reveals that the actual expense is 300 and not 200, which, it's going to be in that range somewhere, then that would also give us an additional year to find the funding. I suppose if we have to go to taxpayers and ask them to make up the difference, then we could do that at that time.
Right. Yeah, I'm just saying that you have the way that until this thing got completed, we wouldn't have to make all the payments. So you have this fiscal year 24, 25, and probably even 26 that you could put money away to get to that 300,000. However you're comfortable doing it. I'm just trying to say the realities on the ground is assessors are very much like code enforcement officers. They don't exist. And right now with what's happened to the whole market, every town, their ratios are crashing and everybody's trying to get their ratios back up. So there's there's a lot of these on the street right now, and there's only so many people that can do it. So it's a hard thing to.
Well, and I also think that the longer we give you to breathe some life into the RFP process, the more likely we're gonna find an opening that we can
Exactly.
negotiate for.
So it doesn't have to be 200, it could be, 100 or 250 or, whatever.
Yeah, really, any amount would be fine to really get the process
And it
started.
doesn't matter that it's just sitting there somewhere else other than.
Nope, because all of these reserve funds are, they're all mingled in the same account. They're kept track of off book isn't the right word. But they're kept track of in an accounting software. They're not broken up as separate checking accounts. They're not separated in the bank. They're managed in an accounting software that tells us where the money is. But
So it's all in a big lump, but
at the bank,
inside there. it's
not in my office.
separate.
What is the ratio right now in the town of Hornet?
This upcoming year, it'll be 72, and because the thing is 2 years behind, I would expect it to be somewhere around 60 for next year. So it's fallen fast. We were about 84 last year, and you can certify up to 10% higher than what your ratio is. So that 72 is gonna keep falling, so we're gonna, and the effect is that as that falls, your homestead exemption falls in correlation to it. So instead of getting 25, you're only gonna get 15, 10. We get less in homestead exemption, less in school. So all of that lines with that number, and it continues to drag on you as you.
So we're in a hurry to get a revaluation done so that.
The other question is, it's a loss of how much are we losing because it's down that far? And the thing is if you're losing that, what's it costing the town?
Exactly.
Expedite it quicker.
Yeah.
I don't know that we have a hard number for you, a dollar number of exactly how much that is, but it is a growing problem where people are forfeiting their homestead exemption qualifications. If we let this continue to build. Yeah. And that's just the state law. I mean, we have to comply with the state law.
Absolutely.
So we're suggesting that we go with the, not 75,000, but more.
Well, my suggestion would be to strike the $75,000 hit to this year's budget. So we don't ask taxpayers to fund that, and instead we use the $1.8 million undesignated fund balance to fund a $200,000 set aside. It would go into a reserve account. It's not going to be spent. It's just going to be set aside and committed so that then Justin can get the wheels moving on a revaluation.
And 200,000 is,
It's kind of the bare bones minimum. Maybe we could get someone to do the job for 200K, but probably not. It'd be enough. It's a good down payment.
For lack of a better word, it's kind of gimmicky, if you will, because we're not gonna spend the money right now, so it's still gonna be there available for us to pay the bills with, but it's gonna be set aside for this purpose. So it won't have any impact on our cash flow because we're not gonna spend it in the next year. But it will be available. Yeah, but the intent would be that it would be used for that purpose. So any amount you're comfortable with is fine. I wouldn't probably go much more than that, because we're kind of at the minimum now, but because again, we're not using it to, go buy something on July 1st. It's really not, it doesn't really have much of an impact.
so 200.
Okay. You okay with that?
That's good.
That sounds. right to me.
200 and not a negative, but not a $75,000 charge.
Okay, Mark?
Kent and I had this discussion the other day, and I think he's on the right track. Yes. I am in agreement.
Just as an aside, I don't have any specific news for anyone on the school budget. I don't have any hard numbers for you, but I did have a conversation with Superintendent Amro, also known as Super Rick, class of '85. And I had a conversation with him earlier today. He is well aware that what was published in the Kennebec Journal showing an 8 or 9% increase in RSU two budget line is not acceptable. And he is working diligently to go back, sharpen some pencils and whittle that down to, I mean, he didn't give me anything specific, but I think his goal is to get it below an inflationary increase.
Which would be,
Don't know. We'll find out. He's still negotiating. But be prepared for some hard decisions. I mean, 80% of their costs are labor. So it's gonna be
they're already built in increases.
rate increases. So when the rate increase is baked in, then there's not a whole lot of, positions have got to give. Right?
What happens in July? That's the big thing when Richmond is gone.
Well,
Our property valuation is a lot higher than Dresden, so.
Oh, God,
Sure.
yes,
So-
we've always been the highest, assessed the highest amount of the RSU two budget. And, as I will always continue to say that for me to sacrifice, a public works position and a police position to sacrifice safety on the roads in the wintertime and safety, losing a police, not being able to fund another police officer sticks in my craw because I'm having to pay exorbitant amounts to the RSU. Every month when that number is on the warrant, which it is tonight, I swallow really hard and bite my tongue. So, I can't say enough about that. So I won't say anything at all other than that.
the published figure, to get to your question, Dan, the published figure that you saw in the Kennebec Journal was sort of the preliminary figure for what happens when Richmond leaves.
Yeah, and so I did the math on that, taking what we pay right now, if it is 5%, right now we pay a year, $5,832,720 a year to the RSU. If there's a 5% increase in that, it'll be $291,636 more a month. And so the ending number at 5% increase is $6,124,356. So, well, unless my calculator's broken, this is, I did this, obviously.
We're paying $500,000 a month right now.
So that is, yeah, I mean, I did the math on that, but I mean, I could be wrong, but I multiplied the number tonight by 12. So it,
The RSU.
to the RSU, so.
On our warrant tonight.
So short answer is stay tuned.
A lot of money.
They're still, they're working on it.
Yeah, and,
And, it's, it was clear from my conversation with Superintendent Amaro that there are no sacred cows.
and, those are the hard decisions we all end up having to make, so.
So say we know the math, what it is, you go by dollar. 68 cents on every tax dollar, what is that?
I've never done, that's way too complicated a math for me.
Yeah.
Well, that's about right.
That's
Is the, of our $10 or $11 million budget that taxpayers pay in the town of
So
Monmouth.
that would be
68 cents on every dollar goes to the RSU.
a mill.
We close, the town budget's a little under 4. Total is 11 something, and the county's like,
Yeah.
$500,000 or something like that, so, yeah.
I figured it'd be close to 70 cents.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Get close to those numbers as it will come to know that, because that should really help you or prevent you from making any harsh financial decisions as well. I mean, we're getting hit by a lot of different places. So I hope you guys keep your thumb on that pulse.
Yeah, but we don't have any control over it.
Correct.
We have
That's
no
why-
control over the RSU. As I've always said, we can only control our, 38% of
Right.
the tax.
But it
base,
will control, you decide for your board.
Yeah,
Yes, it will affect your.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Because it affects us financially.
and that's the decisions we're making tonight, what we're getting rid of on our end. Primarily, we're looking at the 5th police officer in a public works position, which isn't staffed right now, so, and, on and on and on, so. So the next thing was the public works position, which is vacant. Obviously, if it's vacant, and it's been vacant for how long?
Try to be here.
Then
And the police officer,
yeah. Would just be an additional one.
which would, if we had one, it would, change the amount we put in our overtime,
Overtime.
so that would help.
Well,
Right, so the number
The
that's
number
in
that
here
net
is the net.
the net savings.
The net savings.
The net savings,
Because it's about the equivalent of that has to be added back in,
Yes.
cover the overtime and
yeah,
Sure.
exactly.
Let's understand.
the reserve hours.
Yeah.
Where are we being commensurate with other communities like? It's like to know.
With increases,
Like what the town of Windsor pays for their DOT folks and a similar person here and, I mean, are we competitive in our wages?
for our, I would say for our public works and our police officers are underpaid compared to everybody around us.
And,
That's what I was looking at. Thinking.
and, we have no control over that. They're unionized and we can't do anything about that.
That definitely speaks volumes as to why that's happening.
Exactly.
Thank you.
So,
I think that's kind of the pressure that the chief was trying to get at is because he doesn't have any reservists anymore, really, that it's not a pool. That he's basically forcing people to go work overtime. And when they can go to Gardner with a $15,000 signing bonus and make, 5, 6, I don't know, how much more an hour.
Between 4 and 5.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough.
it's very.
And that's with the big investment that we put into this union contract to try to get them close. They all recognized they couldn't get there. But the board made an effort to try to at least show them that, that we cared.
So clarify for me, the Woodbury Pond, we had this money, set aside for the Woodbury Pond repair. And we didn't end up being that much. So that money we're able to take out of that line.
No, that number right now is in the capital.
Okay.
It's a
in
hit
the
to the
capital.
tap,
Okay.
right? So the only thing that I was giving you an option there is if you wanted to, you could roll that expenditure into the Cocknogan Dam bond.
Okay,
So that you could reduce that amount for next year. It's really kicking the can, but it would pull that down to probably, an extra 1,000 next year instead of the 32,000 that we've committed to for our share of that dam.
I think that that's a good plan to move that from what we didn't use in Litchfield to what we need to use or going to need to use in Monmouth. So,
Did we ever get a word from our accountant or our auditors on their outlook on our level of indebtedness as a town?
No,
Would that be something we could have before we sign?
I don't know. I didn't ask.
Okay.
It's something that he would really have to probably talk to you about because I'd be, third-handing stuff that I don't really understand, but if he's available, I can certainly have him.
So the question that's come up on a couple of occasions for everyone's benefit is like, how does Monmouth compare with a similarly sized town with a similar budget in terms of its debt service and outstanding principal balance? And at the last time we discussed it, which was 2 years ago, and that was prior to us taking on the debt from the Maple Street sidewalk project. 2 years ago, the feeling of the auditor was that it was totally appropriate, that we were fine. Our credit rating in town was not in question at all. And that we were within a manageable level in terms of our ability to pay debt service. So
Maple Street was a TIF.
it is, well, it comes from the TIF, but yet we did fund it with some financing. So the debt service comes from the TIF revenues, which, by the way, are we've got probably close to 700,000 reserve. It's somewhere in that ballpark. There's a significant reserve in the TIF, which is intentional because the town is anticipating that when DOT is done with its project in 2024-ish on Main Street, that there's going to be another sidewalk project that we would follow up with to fix the sidewalks that are falling apart in front of Compton Hall. So we're saving for that. Nonetheless, there's some standards for that financial people would take a look at to compare town to town. And then the last issue that we discussed. And by the way, Chris, before we move away from it, I think I'm in agreement with you, and I don't know how Mark feels about this, but a $32,000 increase to what we're asking voters to authorize for the Cocknoagan Dam seems pretty reasonable to me if it helps ameliorate whatever increase we need to ask for this year. The last issue is the issue of the salt shed, and we had quite this was actually initiative for to respond to quite a few complaints and constructive criticisms that we got this winter by we're looking for a way to go to salt priority that's inexpensive and that doesn't mean we have to build a huge salt shed. It means we have to do a small one so that we can pre-treat the roads, much like the towns of Litchfield and Winthrop and I think it might Wales as well. We spent the winter answering complaints about why we weren't adapting our methodology to what those three towns were doing. Because every time you cross the town line, you can see where Monmouth's not doing salt priority and Litchfield is. And so the first thing we need to do is to have the means for being able to store salt. Because it changes the public works needs for when you apply it and how much you need to have on hand. So our initial, estimates on the salt shed was from couple of years ago was like $400,000 or $500,000 for a brandy new salt shed that, does everything. We're, I think, looking at scaling that down and doing the best we can with what we've got and what we can afford. And originally we'd thought about, I think this was Mark's idea from last meeting. We thought about, doing a temporary storage addition to the garage that could also later operate as an equipment bay. So a small addition and then something in the order of $90,000 to $100,000 to add some additional footprint to the town garage that we could store salt in for now. and then reserve something for a much larger structure later on down the road. I'm certainly in favor of doing something to support the public works folks in, moving us forward to a full implementation. It may not be full this time around, or next time around, I should say. It makes sense to me that we allocate $100,000 for an additional bay to the garage to be used as salt storage. I don't know that we can afford reserving $150,000 for a future, a larger building at some point, and we may have to wait until next year to reassess where we stand. So my proposal to the board would be that we change that figure from 250,000 to 100,000, and that we earmark it as an addition to the town garage, not to exceed $100,000. And it would be for the purpose of storing salt.
Create a facilities reserve so that if for some reason it wasn't enough, it would lapse into the following year budget.
Sure, yeah, or if there's something left over, yeah.
Right, that's
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll put it on the ballot as that question.
Is this feasible?
I don't know from an expert standpoint if I'm the one to answer that question. Just picturing what's against the Public Works building now, as far as the footprint and existing structures that are in place, it wouldn't really be able to be annexed to the building. Have to be freestanding on another part of the property. That's just my initial opinion. You know, an engineer, an architect could maybe say differently, but there's some things in the way that would have to be moved, that would create an expense in order to put it right up against the existing building, in order to be used as additional storage if and when it was placed with a more permanent structure. I've thought a lot about this in the last couple of weeks. I don't know that doing it the way you're just proposing is the right way to go. Especially looking at the fact that you're potentially cutting that open position. And when you compound that with not doing any paving this year, we're gonna need the labor to take care of the roads more than we're gonna need a little extra salt. Not that this is doing anything different with the roads that they didn't do 10 years ago, 20 years ago or more. Like you mentioned, the towns around us have changed and adapted, and therefore it creates this visual that we're not doing anything to our roads just based on the fact that the towns doing salt priority. Salt priority will create the bare roads in the winter, immediate. It'll also in the summer, it will create less ditching, shoulder cutting, sand removal, sweeping, all those things that take much of the summer labor. So I'm hesitant that setting aside 100,000 and doing something partially is a prudent move with what you're facing for decisions and the tax rate. I would rather have the labor do the work than designate money this year for a partial on the salt shed. It's been at least 20 years that the salt shed, sand salt shed combined has been being discussed by this town long before I was even a blip on the radar. And I'm still just a blip. I've only been here a year and a half. But I think we should do it right when we do it and not piecemeal it. So in thinking long and hard about this, I think I'd rather have the labor. I'd rather have you keep my position so I can better service the roads in the winter and in the summer with more labor than probably maybe piecemeal a salt shed at this point. And just reevaluate what size building we need, get new cost estimates, and come back next year with a more prudent, accurate number for what we really need. That's my thoughts.
But, so what about I know there's money set aside from last year for paving. And what you would like additional money raised for paving?
Well, yeah, I asked for paving for this year's budget. I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot if we don't. But I also realize you have tough decisions. So, last year's allocation for paving was a much larger than normal number, but it was to catch us up from 2017 and 2020-ish, when very little, if any, paving was done at all. And previously, there was always 2 to 3 miles a year of road done. But when you get that far behind, yeah, we took a chunk of it, getting it done, but now we're right back to no paving is being considered. It's penny wise, dollar foolish. We're not gonna make any progress on what we did with that larger allocation, because we're still gonna be potentially not paving anything this year, so. I have my opinions as a resident, as a taxpayer, but I'll keep them separate from being the director of public works and say that you should pave something this year. I realize what is stacked there is tremendous. So, yeah, I mean, the request is there for paving, the request is there for the salt shed. I understand your decisions. But I'll stick with, you should pave. It's your choice if you don't. But I'll stick with, I'd rather have the labor position filled at this point, if it comes down to that's the choices. And if you choose none of it, you choose none of it. I'd forge ahead with what given, but that's my opinion.
So Dan, just, we've got some new folks in the audience here and listening in. Can you refresh everyone's mind about the paving that we allocated last year and that is actually going or scheduled to be completed this spring?
Right.
Just so that they can picture it.
Yeah,
Road by road.
Yeah, last year, we chose to pave Sanborn Road, the entire length, 1 3/4 miles. South Monmouth Road from the intersection of Fish Hatchery down to Route 126, which is 8/10 of a mile, possibly. I'm not positive on that. The small extension across Route 126 of Oak Hill up to the Litchfield line, which is, I think, 1/10 of a mile. Blue Road from Main Street to the Norris Hill intersection. And Norris Hill Road from the Blue Road intersection up to Academy. Those roads were all slated to be paved last year due to weather, labor, shortages. Everything. It got bumped like the previous year's paving did. And it is on the slate to be done as soon as the weather permits this year.
Okay.
Which, the way this spring is going, could be June. But I spoke to the paving contractor. Probably, I think I spoke to him before the March 8th meeting. And he assured me that we're number one, ready to go. He's just waiting on weather. So those 5 roads will be paved.
And what we did accomplish last year was
Cressy Road was able to be done by the contractor last year, which was 6 inches of spec gravel, crushed gravel to build up the base. Yeah, so.
In the Cumston Hall parking lot.
Thank you. Yes, and Cumston Hall parking lot is on the agenda. That's a separate contractor. They have yet to start thinking about scheduling, just waiting on the weather. They don't want to overpromise, underdeliver. So, yes. I had mentioned last year and talked to Paul that the police department parking lot is in need of serious attention. That was gonna come out of this year's paving budget allocation. But at this point, it's obviously in limbo.
And Justin, based on, if we made no changes today to the budget, so these are just the changes, what we've been discussing are changes to the budget. If we made no changes to the budget today and assume that the school department was gonna move forward with a 5% increase, which might be possible, but I don't know. We don't know. I mean, Kennebec Journal saying 8 or 9 on average. Who knows? What rate of increase would the taxpayers pay in Monmouth?
Very generally speaking, right, because it doesn't apply to everybody, so 10 to 15%,
15% increase on average.
10 to 15, yeah, depending on what you all approve for Donna to do with her factoring. She's going to come to you later to determine that.
Okay, well, tell me more about that.
She is going to recommend at some point later to factor the town up to some degree, like across the board, raise property values, which has the opposite effect of lowering the mill rate. But it affects people differently when you do it across the board. You know, a 10% hike on a $100,000 home is different than a 10% hike on $1 million, right? So that's so it's hard to give you a number, but that's where you're looking at right now with the school. There's a 5% built into the budget you see in front of you, which was a guesstimate based on just, I think their union contract is 5%. So I just use that, not knowing what that's going to be. So but somewhere in that range. They're the big part of the budget. So
we are between a rock and a hard place. And what Chris said earlier is absolutely correct. We control 32% of the financial destiny of Monmouth taxpayers. If the county and the RSU are the remaining amount.
What was the county increase this year?
it was like 5 or 6%.
Yeah.
Over here. I don't have, I'm sorry, I don't have my newest page, but it was somewhere around there. Yeah, sorry, I don't have the number. Before, but I don't know what it is.
What do we have to decide?
You don't have to decide anything tonight. I just need direction because anything that you want to change, I have to include in the warrant, which you have to approve at the next meeting.
All right.
So we've got to come up with a draft. Essentially, that we will officially approve next time around.
Right.
You have a mill rate of 19.6.
It's based on, it's based on all the stuff that's in here with the schools. Yes.
And a 15% increase.
Right, you have to consider that includes the.
So the mill rate that you see in our agenda packet is
the stuff you've kind of taken out is probably.
assumes a 15%,
flat,
but like bakes in a 15% increase to taxpayers. Which is why we're here talking about trimming this stuff back where we can.
I have you've kind of formally decided on Woodbury Pond. I'm not sure what else you guys had on your own agendas and you're coming in and you've decided on the revaluation reserve fund. I'm not sure where you are with some of these other items.
And suggested we have to keep the Department of Public Works person, he would really important. And the police officer is very important. We have to keep those.
Doug, I want to support the police department as much as possible. I'm uncertain that this year is going to be the right year to add an additional police officer. And
We're gonna lose police officers.
I hear you. I don't want that to happen. The trouble with the proposal of adding an additional police officer is that it's only for a half year, and we get to the end of the fiscal year. And next year, when we come back to taxpayers, there's going to be an additional increase because now we have to fund an entire year of a police officer, which means we've got to go back. If we do it this year, we're increasing the ask for next year too.
Yeah. We can't, I don't see how we can keep asking the officers to do what they're doing now with all the overtime they have to put in.
Those. When they do, chief, when they do the overtime, do they get an additional amount of working overtime?
The overtime is time and a half.
Time and a half. So some of them probably like it.
Some of them want to spend more time with.
Yeah.
Problem is we have 2 open shifts a weekend. And in order to fill them, we're ordering people in to work the overtime. We got 1 reserve who's able to work 1 shift every other week, if we're lucky. And we got another reserve who is in training right now, and I'm hoping to sign him off within the next month. So he'll be available to pick up an occasional shift here and there, but his normal job, he works Saturday, so take him off a Saturday shift. He might be able to work Sunday, or if someone's on vacation during the week, fill in a shift during the week. Trying to find a reserve officer right now is very difficult because of the environment around law enforcement nowadays. $20 an hour.
Yeah.
Is it easier for you to fill a full-time position as opposed to, or what do you even think you can fill a full-time position?
The plan is if the full-time position passed, that Zach would be up and trained and Zach would fall into that 5th position.
So we've got somebody in the pipeline.
Yes.
Okay.
Justin, on a different note, do we have a number for what our share or what the cost is going to be to replace that culvert on the Wilson Pond Road by Beaverbrook Campground? Did we budget for that?
Yes, that is budgeted in here with the 150,000 from DEP that we've already received, or not received, but we've been selected for in a grant.
Should we consider approaching maybe the town of Leeds or the town of Wayne to ask for assistance in paying for this, since it's one of their largest taxpayers in their town that needs this replacement done?
Yes, we certainly can. But it doesn't impact the borrowing because the bank has to hold their finger on somebody, and it's going to be us because it's in Monmouth. So we could use that to make payments on the other side, but it doesn't change our sort of outlook right now with with asking to borrow the money.
Like how Litchfield worked with us on.
Right, exactly. So they took the responsibility for it, and then we gave them some money back on the other end to make their payments.
So we'll add that to your to-do list, to reach out to Wayne and.
It's easier to do once you, like, we didn't get our formal request from Litchfield until their project was done because they wanted to divide the total amount out, but they approached me earlier than that and said, you know, this is what we're gonna be asking you
Yeah.
for. Can you get that kind of wink from your board? And we did. We
Yeah.
talked about what that would be.
Yeah, so start that process for that.
Right, certainly.
That's perfect.
Yeah, we certainly need to budget for it, but I think it's worth asking for sure.
Yeah, sure.
I have a question. In the past year, how much new evaluation been added to the town?
I had that at one meeting and I don't have it with me. So right now I can't, I'm sorry, I can't. I did bring that to a meeting because Ken asked me that question. I can't remember what it was though. Do you recall? I don't recall. Maybe I have it. Let me see. I have a lot of stuff here.
2 million. So if you look at the history of that question, like in the most recent year was 2 million. That would be 2022. In 2021, there was a dip, which it's theorized is because we've missed some permitted work. Didn't have a CEO. So there was a dip to something like 1.2, 1.3, something like that. In the prior year, there was it sort of went back to the norm. So, yeah. So there's, yeah, have you got it?
Yeah, I have it. So total new value as of April 1, 2022, this is reported on the county growth factor, was 10,508,000. But keep in mind, 6.5 million of that was the substation, which goes into the TIF. So the remainder of that 4 million or so that'd be, I mean, I'm doing it rough off the top of my head, but that's what it was.
In what year?
This is for April 1, 2022.
2022.
So it would have been looking back.
So
21 to 22.
in the year prior to the 4 million that Justin is referring to, there was a dip, which sounded really odd because that was the year of the pandemic and everyone was going nuts doing stuff around the house. Right? Like you couldn't even buy material in the hardware store. It was flying out off the shelves so fast. So that's what sort of convinced us that it's time for a revaluation on the ground. Boots on the ground revaluation.
So Doug,
I thought our town is it over 400 million,
Yes,
the total?
yes, it's close to 5, I think now. Yeah.
Wow. So 1 mil would raise 500,000, a mil increase.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, yeah, I mean, if you do the math, it gets a little wonky because of all the exemptions and everything, because you have to take all that, you have to take all the homestead exemptions, and you got to subtract all that out, and then we get a portion of that back from the state. And then with our ratio falling to 72, so it gets complicated, but yeah, you could say that as a general statement, but it doesn't always equal, what you would expect because of all those state programs and that are involved.
So it would be more like a mil would raise maybe a little over 400,000.
Probably about 40,000.
Yeah. Yeah, right? Yeah.
About 40,000.
Yeah, because get $1 million, to get $1 million in revenue, we need like 50 million in, in new taxable value.
so looking at, the things on our list. Public Works position and the 5th police officer, those are 2 of the 3 least amounts. So we're looking at a difference of, if we did it all, it'd be 439,000 off. But if we did, the revaluation reserve fund, salt shed, and the Woodbury Pond adjustment there, that's 357,000 that we'd be taking off the bottom line. So it's, those two positions are about 82,000. Which, knowing that we've got somebody in the pipeline for that 5th officer position. I really hate to penalize. We've got a good thing going here in the police department, and I really hate to penalize the police department because of what we're looking at with the RSU.
Our neighbor, Litchfield, pays zero for police.
I know.
They pay zero.
Yeah.
I think it's a matter of wants and needs.
Wants and needs.
And I
And
think,
yeah,
yeah, I think it'd be nice to have that extra officer, but I think we can't burden the taxpayer more this year. I don't.
yeah.
I would definitely invite the chief. If we decide not to do this year, I would be very interested in looking at it next year. But with a 15% increase, it seems to me like we need to be looking at every opportunity to save the taxpayers whatever we can. And it's not an expression of not wanting to support the police officers.
And it's not taken like that. I get it. I understand.
Mark, but I want to hear from you.
Kent and I did have a conversation the other day about cutting these positions. And yeah, I mean, I was in agreement. I have to pay these taxes too. And one of the reasons people encouraged me to run was they're sick of their taxes going up. But now that I'm here and I see what we go through, sometimes you can't help it. The cost of everything has gone up. And obviously our taxes are gonna go up. I'm worried. I have a lot of respect for what Dan does in the public works. And I have concern about not moving to salt priority before next winter. I don't know that extra man would have made much of a difference in the roads, but I mean, I don't know for sure. I was not there. I know he's got a very difficult job. But I know I got a lot of people calling me about the condition of the roads, and the explanation was the lack of salt priority. So are people willing to spend a little more to have the roads bare the day after the storm? It may be. I think it's inevitable we're going to have a tax increase. It's just a matter, is it going to be 8% or 12 or 15%?
So we have to make a decision tonight or next time?
So I didn't think much.
Well, let me make a motion and we'll see where it goes. I make a motion that we no longer fund the open position at the Public Works. And that we do not fund the additional police officer. So we save the $31,000 that was baked into the budget. And that for the salt shed reserve fund, we fund $100,000 for some capital expenditure at the Public Works site for the purpose of storing salt, and we figure out what that gets us.
Well, I'm gonna second it just so that we can discuss it. But I would like you to amend the motion, if you would, to eliminate the salt shed reserve fund completely and allot no money for the $100,000 for an alternate building. I think that should go too. So. But
I would rather have the right thing than the wrong thing, for sure, you know, spend good money after
Yeah.
bad. I'm right there with you on that one. I'd rather have, you know we're getting the right thing when we can afford the right thing.
All right, I'll happily accept your friendly amendment. Consider it so moved.
I'll second it again.
So, more discussion.
Anything from you, Mark?
So I heard this correctly. We are not funding the police officer position. We are not funding the public works position, and we are putting $0 aside for a salt shed.
Correct.
And just to round out the list that's on your agenda there, things we've already sort of agreed on, we're not funding $75,000 reserve revaluation fund. Instead, we're finding it from the undesignated fund balance. And I think we already agreed to this, we're going to take our portion of the Woodbury Dam repair and bond that, pair it with the Cocknoagan repair bond. So there's just an additional $32,000 of debt that we would borrow from the bank.
Question, are you gonna add money to the planning board secretary or recorder as part of this budget?
So we asked that question and the town
I had
manager
mentioned before that we have money for that.
Okay,
Our-
in next year's budget. as
Yeah,
well?
it's built in here, so, and we can move forward with it now because yes. We hear you.
Yes, so, Kent made a motion, Joe seconded it to, do all those, make those. I'm not gonna repeat the change. So all those in favor of the, doing what Joe and Ken have proposed?
I vote yes.
Mark votes yes.
And I'll vote opposed.
There we go.
There you go.
There you go.
More stuff to go.
More stuff to go tonight.
All right.
It's gonna be late night.
It's gonna be a late night.
May I ask a clarifying question?
So, to consider how to dispose of the following foreclosed properties on at 926 Cobussy Road. It's like a big number off Wagon Road. And 11 Perkins Road.
We had numbers because it's not addressed, so it's like an ID number and this, because it doesn't have an address because there's no frontage.
It's landlocked.
Yeah, it's a-
Yeah. It's just like that.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with that property.
That one that's just to the left, if you're crossing the bridge, it's right kind of down on
I
the,
think it's landlocked.
yes, it is.
And we're probably, we can dispose of it, but I don't think anyone's gonna buy it.
Well, we had a landlocked piece and we sold it to an abutter. So
Yeah, we-
there's always a possibility.
That was tried. I know that was tried.
You're right, sometimes these are in this situation because they're not valuable. People just, they aren't too concerned
Yeah.
about it, so there is that possibility too.
Yeah. But at least we're moving forward with it,
Yes.
so.
Yeah, I think
So
So.
I make a motion that we.
Can you,
Do
before,
you want
well,
to-
go ahead and make the motion and then I'll ask my question. Maybe part of it.
I make a motion that we put these 3 properties, 926 Cobussy Road. 3,000. 35,002 off Wagon Road and the 11 Perkins Road out for bid.
Second. Okay, here's my questions. So I understand where Cobussy Road, where's the Wagon Road parcel?
That's what we were just.
You know, once you just put that, unless you're a duck, you can't get to it.
Yeah.
So. Logan.
Which, the Wagon Road one?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's no access, it's land that is.
Yeah.
I'm interested because I own a piece of the middle of nowhere there. Maybe I want to buy
Well,
it.
There you go.
exactly.
There you
So,
go.
yeah, so we owned a piece on the end of the road that was and the abutters bought it. So, because it was a woodlot back in the day.
It's like a little end
Everybody-
piece that's like in the crook of a stream,
Yeah,
sits out there by itself.
people own these little pieces and they had
Make a nice duck
You know.
line for March.
access by abutters to go across to cut wood.
It's on the other side of the Brooklyn line.
Yeah.
All right, and then, no, go ahead.
You could add to your, domain, your realm.
All right, and then what is Perkins Road? 11 Perkins Road?
I think that's a piece of land.
That's a piece of land. There's nothing else.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
So it's a lot. Is it a buildable lot?
It is,
Yeah, I'm just trying to
I can't
judge the valuation we're talking about here.
The acreage is 8.46, so I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that it's buildable at 8 acres.
Yeah. Right.
I had to look that up. Perkins Road, if you go up to the top of Oak Hill, and it's the road on the left.
Yeah, you have to go into Litchfield to get
To
to
get
Monmouth.
to Monmouth, yes.
That
I
one.
run a school bus around there. Karen drives down there, so far. Seriously.
So you drive
Yeah.
up Oak
Yeah.
Hill Road, Oak Hill,
Oak Hill,
and you take a left.
take a right,
Yeah.
sorry, a left,
Right.
a left,
Yeah.
a
Some don't want
left,
that
yes, yes.
Some don't want that lot.
Just so you know, the road goes all the way through, comes back.
Yes, it does. Comes on to.
See,
There's some wet wheeling down there, though.
break the mirrors off.
We have a motion and
So the
second.
motion by Joe.
I made the
Oh,
motion.
nice. Chris, seconded by Joe to dispose of those properties. Listed. All those in favor?
Mark votes yes.
Thank you.
There you go.
Next is the warrant for number 19. 22, 23.
Barry Talbot and Royer, $9,273, business services and the additional work to help us with the 21 audit. Blue Rock Earthworks, culverts, material transport, $3,497. Dennis K. Burke, fuel, $9,030. PDI services, the cleaning company, $3,421. JRD Electrical, 5,009. Is this for you, Dan? Is that you or is that JRD? I can't.
Yes,
Compton.
That's Constant.
I'm not sure.
Is that, I can't.
I had a fair amount of electrical work.
Okay, so that, yeah, that's what I was thinking it was you, but I couldn't quite remember. I didn't give myself a note. Main PERS, retirement contributions, 5,593. Wingman Salt Company, 11,139. Paul Design Project, architect for the building next door, 3,183, and RSU 486,060. For a grand total of $544,611.56.
I make a motion, we approve warrant number 19, fiscal year 22-23.
Second that.
Motion by Ken, second by Chris to approve warrant number 19. 22, 23. All those in favor?
Mark votes yes.
Thank you.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Well, we had executive
Oh,
session.
I make a motion, we go into executive session pursuant to one MRSA six
Thanks,
A
everybody.
personnel.
Thank you. You guys know, things haven't changed it too.
Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
Can you second and vote that so I can turn off the?
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Thank you.